Wait, thanks. Good evening and welcome to the April 24th meeting of the City of Tuscaloosa Zoning Board of Adjustment. I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name is Rob Stewart. I am the chairman of the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and I'm going to start to my far left and have my fellow board members introduce themselves.
Joseph Eatman Sr.
Michelle Coley.
Paul Rollins Jr.
Linda Ford.
Mary Catherine Holt.
And if I could, I'd like to recognize the city staff who's in attendance tonight, starting with Miss Emily Hayes, our Neighborhood Resources Coordinator, Mr. Jonathan Bowen, our city planner, Miss Angie Terrell in the back, our administrative assistant, from the Office of City Attorney, Miss Kim King, Associate City Attorney, and Mr. Kevin Jones, who is handling all of our audio and video this evening. The Board of Adjustment does not have the authority to enact zoning laws or special exception, nor does the board have authority to rule on claims of equal protection of the law or the fairness or unfairness of any zoning ordinance. By virtue of state law and city ordinances, the purpose of the ZBA is as follows: to hear appeals from decisions of the zoning officer of the city, to grant special exceptions in the zoning code in accordance with the terms as established by the city council, and to grant variances from the terms of the zoning code when, owing to the special conditions, a literal enforcement of the code would result in an unnecessary hardship. No one factor determines what is an unnecessary hardship, but all relevant factors, when taken together, must indicate that the plight of the property in question is unique and that it cannot be put reasonably to a conforming use because of the limitations imposed upon it by reason of its classification in a specified zone. A working definition of an unnecessary hardship is as follows: the property cannot be put to any reasonable use under its current zoning classification. It must be a unique and peculiar difficulty relating to the property of the serious and significant nature. It must relate to the property and not to any personal issues. This includes economic, financial gain or loss. A variance may not be granted where the property owner merely suffers a financial loss of a kind that is common to all the property owners in an area. Circumstances that are not considered hardships: self-inflicted or self-created, inconvenience, or personal. The Zoning Board of Adjustment, by virtue of state law and the City of Tuscaloosa ordinance, does not have the jurisdiction or authority to consider, interpret, and/or enforce any term or condition of subdivision covenants and/or homeowner association rules and regulations. These matters are therefore not relevant areas of inquiry by the board on any petition. Such covenants or regulations are between the private parties involved and not the ZBA. That having been said, any decision made by the ZBA on any particular case does not necessarily preclude the enforcement of such subdivision covenants and/or HOA rules or regulations by other lawful means. This is a public hearing. It is being recorded, videotaped, and streaming live on the city's website, Facebook, as well as on local cable TV. Proper decorum, civility, and respect for others is required at all times. There are sign-up sheets, as I mentioned earlier, in the back. 4 speakers who have signed up in favor of a petition will be allowed to speak, and 4 speakers who are opposed to any petition will also be allowed to speak. All speakers will have a maximum of 5 minutes unless the board votes to allow a longer time. This 5-minute rule is actually been extended. Our rules were changed at the beginning of the year. And in essence, we're not going to sit here all night and hear 100 comments saying the exact same thing. It's not fair to the individuals of the cases you're listening to or the 15 other cases that were here tonight. So make salient points. You might choose, if you have more than to speak, let someone speak on your behalf if it's for representing a neighborhood, but that's the rule, and it's going to be a hard 5 minutes we're sticking to. When you're at the podium, please speak directly into the microphone and state your name and address for the record. All comments should be directed to the board. No questions or comments should be directed to the city staff. I would ask staff to confirm for the record that all the appropriate and required public and individual property owner notices for each case upon the docket of petitions now before the board have been made in accordance with the law.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. The following procedure will be followed for each petition. This hearing is an opportunity for the petitioners to present their case, for the public to inquire and make their views known about the petition, and for the board members to gather relevant facts before making their decision. City staff will introduce the petition and present facts and information to the board concerning the same. The petitioner or the petitioner's representative will be asked to make comments and answer questions from the board. The board will have a maximum of 10 minutes unless the board votes to allow a longer time. The 4 members of the public that are in support of the petition and the 4 members of the public that are in opposition to the petition who signed up to speak will then be afforded an opportunity to make inquiries and comments. At the close of public comments, the petitioner will be asked to respond to the comments if necessary. Any rebuttal will be limited to 2 minutes unless board votes to allow a longer time. The chair may then permit the public to respond, but only to any new issues raised by the petitioner in rebuttal. Any response will be limited to 2 minutes unless the board votes to allow a longer time. At the close of public comment, or once the board is satisfied that it has received all relevant information on a petition, the chairman will close further comment or discussion, and the board will then discuss the matter. The chair will read into the record the motion to approve the request, along with any conditions set by the board, and the board members will commence voting. 4 votes are required to approve any petition, not a simple majority of the board. As you can see before you, we've got 6 members present. 5 of us tonight will be voting members. Our 6th is a supernumerary non-voting in case there's an issue with the conflict of interest. And for any of the petitioners present, the yard signs that the city staff has placed in your yard, please leave those standing, and the city will be out to pick those up just as soon as possible. Any party aggrieved by any final judgment or decision of the Board of Zoning Adjustment may, within 15 days, appeal to the circuit court by filing with such board a written notice of appeal specifying the judgment or decision from which the appeal is taken. The board members have had a chance to review tonight's agenda items. Do any of the members have a conflict of interest with any of the cases on the agenda? No. Ms. Hayes, are there any changes to the agenda? Okay. And no. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, good evening. I'm going to give you all a very brief update on our most recent framework discussion. So at the most recent framework meeting, we discussed signs and billboards. So just an overview of this, we kind of touched on some Supreme Court cases that specifically helped in crafting this sign ordinance so that we ensure that we are not violating the First Amendment. So one of the cases that were discussed was essentially about how the city's ordinance was restricting specifically what could be said on a sign, and that does violate the First Amendment as was ruled upon by the federal court, or the Supreme Court. So essentially with that, that's something that is being discussed, is something we are talking about. So purpose of this article is another thing that we kind of discussed. It just establishes the regulations for the display and maintenance of signs with the intent to preserve, protect, and enhance areas and views of natural resources, establish standards that permit reasonable use of signs, and establish specific requirements for signs and billboards. We also discussed definitions, updated or new definitions for different sign types, general provisions, which are just the regulations that have been carried forward and updated to reflect modern practices with specific provisions that apply to all signs. Some district-specific provisions, which we do currently have, but we're just kind of combining it all into one ordinance with the downtown and riverfront zoning districts. And finally, for nonconformities, there was really minimal changes to these best practices, with many regulations being carried forward from our current code. But one thing to note is there is a new section that provides relief for nonconformities that are created by eminent domain or those created by voluntary donation of land for public purposes. So our next meeting is going to be May 3rd. We're going to talk about land use regulations. So our case that has been withdrawn is ZBA 3323. Now we'll move on to our petition for a waiver of Rule 13. Kramer and Elizabeth Mize are petitioning for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a property located at 3308 University Boulevard East, zoned R1, Council District 5. This was previously heard and denied as ZBA 0123. If this waiver is granted, it will be heard as ZBA 4223. And just a reminder of what Rule 13 is. So any petitions that have been adversely voted against are barred from coming back before you for at least 6 months. This keeps these cases from continuing to come every single month until they can get approval or just continuing to get denied. With this, any petitioner that is requesting for this must demonstrate to the board that there are valid reasons for the waiver, which must include the following. An equitable fairness issue exists wherein such a delay would adversely impact the petitioner through no fault of the petitioner in a manner different from other petitioners, and the petitioner has made significant modifications in the design or plan that addresses the reasons for the adverse decision by the board. So the petitioner's reasoning for requesting this waiver is they state they, quote, faced an equitable fairness issue because they addressed the board's concerns at the March meeting and were not given any reason as to why they were denied. The owners are petitioning themselves, and the petition has changed to reflect a reduction in the bedroom count, occupancy rate, and requested vehicle number. Do you have any questions for staff?
And just to be clear, I've heard the previous times the petitioner and the representative has come before this body. I was absent at the last meeting, but I have watched the video. My question after watching the video, and you can tell me what was presented as well, to the board during the meeting. The owners are petitioning themselves, et cetera, change to reflect reduction bedroom count. What specifically was given to the board to consider on the bedroom count and the number of vehicles last month?
So on the original petition that was submitted in December, it stated that there were 6 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, and they were requesting for 10 adults, 5 vehicles. In the last meeting, it was discussed beforehand. The presentation that was made to the board was a request for 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, and they were requesting for 8 adults, 4 vehicles. But that was not on the petition that was submitted. That was just something that was requested beforehand by the petitioners.
The board voted
on 8 adults, 4.
Okay, and that is, well, we're not even getting to that point yet, correct?
So that's what they have put on a petition. Oops, sorry.
So
that's
that
what
is-
they've put on a petition now and submitted.
What was voted and denied last month? Okay.
Do I have any more questions?
Any questions? Thank you. Mr. Mize?
Hello, you get Mrs. Mize today as well.
Okay. Just if you could, Ms. Mize, state your full name and your address, please.
Yes, Elizabeth Mize and this is Kramer Mize. We own the property at 3308 University Boulevard. Our residential address is in Northport and 3957 Delwood Street.
And a little different tonight, and y'all have, Mr. Mize, I know, has come before several times. Tonight, under Rule 13, as Ms. Hayes just explained, what we need, you have to meet, can you go back to the 2 tenets that have to be met? Okay. in yellow on the screen behind me, they're highlighted. What I would like you to do is present to us, not the whole case, because we're not hearing the case. Those two tenets have to be met under Rule 13. So if
Yes.
you could address those for
Sure.
us.
So the first point, that an equitable fairness issue exists. So just to briefly, you weren't at the last meeting, but the other board members were, and y'all heard us the other months through our petitioner, Kim Roberts. And she hadn't toured the home since the updates, and she wasn't aware, so that caused some issues in the beginning. So that's why we felt it was best to just submit an entirely new application. Like Emily said, the original application in December had a different amount of all of those things. So, but basically, we just wanted to point out that the delay of pushing it back another 6 months does greatly and adversely impact our family. We are not an investment company. We don't have backers or anything. It's just us and our two kiddos. This was a big investment for our family. We do own 4 mobile homes in the county that we rent out long-term, and we've done this for several years. So we are basing our investment strategy on the Monopoly game, where you get the 4 little houses and then you get the big one. So we got the 4 trailers. We're trying to do the house thing now. This was our first time doing short-term rentals. We weren't aware of all the intricacies, and we were being guided by Kim and what she thought was best for our property. And obviously, her not being as familiar with it was kind of a detriment, because y'all had several questions in the beginning. So, but we just wanted to point out, we are just a family. We live in the area. This is investment for our family. We'd love for our children to live in this house when they go to college. But it greatly impacted our return on this investment. We had a family actually interested in it for graduation weekend next week, and we had to deny that because we haven't been approved for that yet.
And when, of course, 6 months from now, we'll be well into the football season, which is the whole purpose of having a short-term rental in the city. And so even if we're waiting 6 months from then, we're well into that and missing half of it. So that would another reason that a delay would affect us. It is rented currently as a long-term rental, as we discussed last month, because we simply have to cover expenses on it and things like that. But we would like to be able to rent it as a short-term by the time we get to football season.
And to further address the fairness issue, it's our understanding that the ZBA is one of the few boards in Tuscaloosa that does not require a reason for denial, which makes it very difficult for us to know what the issue was. We had 3 yes votes, we had 2 no's. And so it makes it hard for us and for other applicants to know exactly what's needed, because we've seen time after time the board approve even homes in the historic district where 90% of the neighbors, were against it. And since last meeting, we have also have our own petition that we have gone around. We've gone door to door through the neighborhood, through the area, through the businesses, and we have 91 signatures that are in support of the short-term rental. And kind of to address the second issue, some of the modifications, yes, were mentioned at the last meeting, but to officially submit a new application under us, we're familiar with the property. We have put our blood, sweat, and tears into the property. But, it specifically states that the petitioners made significant modifications to address the reasons for the adverse decision, but we weren't given any reasons. So it's hard for us to know exactly what the reason were.
It's hard to address something if we don't know what it is that you were asking for. So we can't address that. And we believe we covered all those issues that you had originally in the last meeting.
Yes, we were asked to get a building permit. We got the building permit. We were asked to get the CO. We got the CO. We were inspected by a short-term rental inspector who actually approved us for a 6-bedroom. But due to the concerns of the Office of Urban Development and the neighbors, we reduced that to 4-bedroom. We've received mechanical inspection, plumbing inspection. We've done everything that was asked of us by the board. So that was just
And if there's
our
more we need to
frustration.
do, if there's more we need to do, we want to do that. We just need to know what it is.
In last month's meeting, when the board voted and you were denied, the ask from the board and what the board voted on, based on the criteria of the home and the evidence you showed, I saw the pictures when I watched the video, you asked for 8 adults and 4 vehicles.
Yes.
Okay. What are you asking for if the Rule 13 is granted, what will you be presenting tonight?
That was what was recommended by the Office of Planning, so that's.
So you're going to be asking for what the board denied you for as far as the head count of adults and the vehicles that were
Yes.
allowed?
but officially on the petition.
Excuse me?
But it will officially be on the petition.
Okay, but that's what the board actually voted on,
Right.
correct?
You're right, yes.
Okay, so we're in agreement on that.
Yes, and
Yes.
one thing that we failed to point out, I know there seemed to be concerns about some of the board members about the impact a short-term rental would have on the character of this neighborhood. Austin subdivision is a very well-established neighborhood. The home we purchased was actually built in 1920, destroyed by the tornado, and then we've done further updates because it was under disrepair. But in the aerial, I don't know if Emily can show those aerial photos yet or not, but we
Well,
are the only home in the neighborhood that has direct access to University Boulevard. So no one that stays at the home will ever even enter the neighborhood. They don't have to go up Forest Drive. They don't have to go 8th Street. We're on the game day route, as they call it,
And we've heard the iteration since December when it started, and so we're very familiar with it. Now, do you have anything else specific to the two bullets that are highlighted here to enlighten us on? Okay. Any questions?
I would like to know, Mr. Ms. Mize, how long is your home rented for? You said it's under a long-term rental contract now?
it's
Yes,
45
it's over
nights.
30 days.
Yeah, so it's 45 nights, the current people that are staying there. There's some
And when
contractors.
is their ending time, their ending date?
May 2nd. So yeah, as Kramer pointed out,
And that's our understanding that that is not against any rules or regulations, correct?
yes, if it's over 30 days, we were
Just want
told,
to make sure.
we can rent it out. I mean, we can rent it to anyone, like we said, it's an investment for our family. We couldn't just have it sitting there month by month with expenses coming.
Any other questions for the petitioners? None? Okay, thank you.
Thank y'all.
Ms. Hayes, just for a point of clarity, under Rule 13, are we considering any other speakers, or is that it under the rule?
So we have previously allowed for anyone that is specifically speaking for or against the waiver itself, not for the potential case.
Okay.
Just for the waiver.
Yeah, okay, we've got it here, thank you. Okay, if I could have Mr. Michael Cornwell come forward, please, thank you.
My name is Michael Cornwell. I live at 3304 University Boulevard for 25 years. This is my fourth time to appear up here. I've spoken 3 times. I look at the first bullet point up there. I'm speaking fast because I know I'm on the clock up there. Issue exists wherein a delay would adversely impact the petitioner through no fault of the petitioner. You may remember that on the February hearing, I went through the original petition filed by Kim Roberts, item by item, and everything in there was false. It was still 2 bedrooms, 2 baths. That pad was put in January, the pad out back. They had cars parked in the rear yard as if they could park back there. They said 8th Street was an alley, and they said it wasn't in a residential neighborhood. That was certified by Kim Roberts on behalf of the Mizes. She is their agent. She binds them. So they have some faults here. And I'm surprised they even mentioned the December 28, 2020 petition, because everything in it was false. The first hearing up here had to be continued because there's a permit problem. There was no permit obtained for anything. The second hearing, I went over everything in that petition that was false, certified, but it was false. That hearing was continued because Kim Roberts got up here and could not state clearly and for certain how many bedrooms are in there now. There still were just 2 by that time. Later, there were 4 bedrooms. The petitioners made significant modifications in the design. No. That design was set out by Kim Roberts in that first petition, and what they have done is, you told them at the second hearing, they couldn't park on 8th Street, they couldn't put cars in the rear yard, they could only put 4 vehicles up there in the front. And by the way, there were 10 vehicles in that yard, in that driveway last Sunday evening. And the one furthest down that driveway was less than a car length from University Boulevard and backed out at some point so the other vehicles could get out. Yeah, they were on the pad. All these were big pickup trucks, one little car. So that's an indication of what we can probably expect from this property. and I'm sure the board has been made aware of this by some of our letters. They're not any kind of hardship, and Kim Roberts is still managing this. It's on Airbnb. It was first posted on Airbnb March the 30th, 3 days after the board denied it. Then it was reposted on, it's supposed to second time, April 15th. The rent went from $250 in the first posting, $344 a day. That comes out to about $10,000 a month for the whole house rental, which is what they have it on there for. And I was informed today that it's booked. Somebody went on there and checked the book. It's booked from August to December. Covered the whole football season. I want to move up there now to the understandable and justifiable reasons for not granting these waivers of Rule 13. Especially it comes in next month after you just denied the petition. The fact that repeatedly hearing the same petition would impede the board's transaction of other business. It would adversely impact other petitioners' opportunity for full hearing. It would be unfair to those in opposition to have to repeatedly attend meetings, as in this case, 4 times. And one couple's not here tonight. They live in Fairhope, and their daughter and son-in-law live in the house on the other side of 3308. It would undermine the credibility of the board's initial decision, and failing to do so without justification would set in an undesired precedent. And certainly in this case, there's fault here. These people are not going to have any kind of adverse impact that's different from some other body that asked for the same reconsideration and waiving the requirement that you have for 6 months. There's a good reason for the rule. And maybe, hopefully at some point, one of the reasons you may deny a position is this discretionary criteria in looking at the decision whether to deny. The board should determine to its satisfaction that the short-term rental of the dwelling will not be detrimental to the neighborhood or surrounding properties, taking into account the physical relationship of the proposed use to the surrounding structures. This will be so disruptive of our little neighborhood. That's peace. We have peace and quiet there, and we'd like to keep it that way.
Thank you, Mr. Cornwell. You nailed the time. You did. You hit it just right, so thank you. Okay, next, in opposition, we have, looks like Miss Anna Schuber.
Good evening. I'm Anna Schuber, 18 Forest Drive. 3308 can be seen out of my back door on my back porch. I've been there 27 years. Speaking in terms of going against the waiver, the rule was they had 6 months. This is my 3rd time here. This is my 1st time speaking. I will be back however long it takes. We don't need this in my neighborhood. This evening or this morning, I sent you an email with all of my issues going on. We have enough issues in that neighborhood in terms of transients. We have transient traffic coming through there. We have the Chateau apartments that are there, not 2 doors down. We also have football boys, fraternity boys that live 2 doors down from that. I know that they want to use this for football, but not everything in this town has to be football related. We have worked very hard in this community after the tornado and destroyed. My house was destroyed, the house next door was destroyed, and on down the street. We've worked very hard to become a family. If they want to rent it full-time, that's fine. We would welcome a full-time rental or a long-term rental into the neighborhood and treat them like family too. But to have people coming and going, we've already got that issue with people coming off of University or coming off of Crescent Ridge. So I'm standing in opposition to this particular waiver, and I'll be back if I have to. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's all we have signed up tonight. There were 2 in opposition. We do not have anyone signed up in favor to speak. At this point, I'm going to move to close public comment, and we'll go to board discussion.
So move.
just so everyone knows, Rule 13, and for some of my counterparts who are new, has been the first time that they've ever experienced this. It's in our rules of procedure, and we've never had it happen with a short-term rental case. So it's a very rare, odd type situation. And as Mr. Cornwell mentioned, and as I stated in my opening remarks, if you're denied, any petitioner is denied by this body, per Alabama code, your only way to avoid waiting 6 months to plead your case again is to appeal it within 15 days to the Circuit Court of Tuscaloosa County. In this case, the petitioner who had that choice and right was voted no or denied last month, did not follow that. Rule 13, we've seen it in the past that it's come before us. It's, again, I hadn't been an STR, but the scenarios have usually been development scenarios where they were denied denied a variance or some special exception and came back with a substantially different design plan. If you look at on the screen behind me, the second bullet point, that's typically where that comes in. The specific reason on a design issue, a setback, what have you, was denied, and in turn, they made a modification. The petitioner, and they agreed to this, last month, they were denied when they asked for 8 adults and 4 cars. They're asking if this Rule 13 is approved, when their petition would come up, if that's the case, they're asking for the exact same thing. That hasn't been met. And also on the equitable and fairness point, it was also mentioned, the petitioner, by choice, is renting this out. And per the petitioner's statement, they have rented this as a long-term, which is legal. So, we're not looking at a financial concern, but out of their mouths, they are already taking advantage of that, which rightfully so. So there is an income stream, so they always have that opportunity to use it that way. So based on, and we don't take it lightly, because when you're denied, you can either go to circuit court, wait 6 months, or if you have something substantial that meets these 2 tenets, you can come before us. In saying that, the petitioner was denied 1 month ago, so there's 5 months left before they can come back, which is a normal practice. I am not in favor of granting a Rule 13 to hear, in essence, the same petition.
I agree. I don't think either one of the specs were met when it comes to granting a waiver for this. Also, I think last meeting we were clear in the reason why we denied it. So along with that, and I basically, we don't want to open ourselves up, I don't think, to having petitioners coming back every week to try to get approved until they get approved. So I'm also not in favor of it.
And to the point of the petitioner, when we asked you to go do things, we kept having to ask you to go back and do things in order to be compliant. That should have been done in the beginning. You were led by a management company that didn't lead you the right way, and they've come before us several times, and so they know what it takes to get something approved, so that's a fault of theirs. And I hate that you have to be the one to experience that because of mismanagement. We were clear last time, no, and so no to Rule 13 on my behalf.
I agree with my other board members. I'm not in favor of granting this Rule 13. I don't feel as though there have been significant modifications to the design of the plan of the petition.
I'm also not in favor. One thing I would like to say is, before we vote, we always make comments of why we're voting the way we vote. So I feel like that it was explained in the last meeting. I don't see any substantial change at all. There is no change. So I would have to vote no.
Okay. If there's no further discussion by the board, we'll move to a reading of the request and a vote. In the matter of Kramer and Elizabeth Mize petitioning for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a property located at 3308 University Boulevard East, zoned R1, Council District 5, previously heard as ZBA-01-23, as regards to granting a Rule 13, voting with
No.
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 The petition failed.
I figured it went blank.
We'll give everybody a second to move on out. Okay, so we'll move into our unfinished business from last month. This was continued from our last meeting, ZBA 2623. John Johnson petitions for a variance from landscape buffer regulations, a variance from the industrial district setback regulations, and a special exception from the off-street parking regulations to construct warehouses on the property located at 2602 30th Street, zoned MG, Council District 2. Here's an aerial view of that property as well as the zoning, and then a closer aerial view of that property. Couple views from the street. And then this is right across the street that Mr. Johnson also owns and built. Applicable regulations, the yard and height requirements. Minimum front yard depth in the MG district is 20 feet. Off-street parking requirement, industrial activity, warehouse, and the like is 8/10 per employee on the maximum shift, plus 1 for each company vehicle stored overnight. And the landscaping requirements, which requires a 50-foot buffer from between industrial and residential uses. Petitioner is requesting a variance from landscape buffer requirements and the industrial district setback regulations to construct 3 dome warehouses. The regulations require a 50-foot landscape buffer between the residents directly to the west of this property. This lot is approximately 53 feet wide, so enforcing the buffer requirements would make the lot unbuildable. Petitioner is also requesting to reduce the required 20-foot front setback along Southside Drive to 5 feet. These 2 variances would allow for a suitable building area to construct the dome warehouses that are approximately 30 feet in diameter. In addition, due to the small parking area available to build these warehouses, the parking can't be fully built on the parcel of land. So the petitioner is proposing to build 2 parking spaces. This is a little bit different than the application that came before you last month on the southern portion of the property. However, they will still be considered on street because they aren't completely on the parcel of land. So it is an exception from the total parking requirement. So this is just to show you the proposal from last month. You've got 2 views, the view of how it actually looks on the map and then something you can see a little bit closer. And then this is their updated proposal. So it's been shifted down a little bit. They've shifted it to the east a tad with those dome warehouses. And then you see those 2 parking spots on the southern side of that property. Do y'all have any questions for staff?
Can you go back to the zoning map, please?
Yeah. There we go. So this is a unique situation, something we discussed last month. The houses that are the residences that are to the west of this property are industrially zoned. They're something that are considered non-conforming. They've just been there ever since way prior to this zoning ordinance being enacted in 72. And so they are considered non-conforming. If they were not occupied for 6 months, they would have to be brought into conformity by making them an industrial use.
So if a residence, a single-family dwelling, mirroring what's adjacent to it, if a petitioner attempted to build that today,
They could not.
they could not build it.
Mm-mm.
Okay. And the existing dome structures across Southside Drive are classified or zoned MG as well.
They are.
Okay.
And they back up. You can kind of see that line a little bit. That's where they are, right in here. and they back up to PJ, which is outside city limits.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
If we could have Mr. John Johnson come forward.
Good evening. I'm John Johnson. I live at 13288 Domes Ridge Road in Duncanville, Alabama. One thing I'd like to point out going in is the third, what I would consider the leftmost building. Out of consideration to the neighbors, they were concerned about them being taller than their house. Well, the two that were in the picture across the street are 40-foot diameter domes. They have a height of 23 feet. What I'm proposing is a 30-foot dome, and it's going to have a height of about 15 feet. I'm further proposing that the one on the left side be not a warehouse, but strictly an office application. So for that reason, I will take the riser wall that the dome rests on and drop it down to 2 feet, which puts me right below the top height of their house next door, even though the house next door does sit down off a ledge. Furthermore, that dotted line on the drawing on the rear of the property there is about 9 to 10 feet from their fence line. There's some discussion about how close that is to the line, but I'm not anywhere close to that. I want to just center them up, lower the one on the left side, and be done with it.
Okay, on the right side of the drawing, the property line I think you just
Correct.
referenced, that's got a 10-foot shows from the dotted line to the fence. Tell us about, those are trees or shrubberies that are shrubbery that's
On the
represented?
right-hand side, there's used to be a substation. It's some sort of a wireless hub, and I thought perhaps you would want some evergreens down that side to divide it off. The people behind me were concerned about me blocking their sunlight, so I eliminated that row of small trees. I didn't want anything growing over the house, so eliminated that. But like I said before, there's a drop-off there, probably about this far, and it wouldn't be buildable, so it's a good buffer.
And then you mentioned your neighbors, so you have had conversations with your neighbors?
Yes, sir. They've been sheltering in my shelter for about 3 years, as well as parking on that property for the last couple of years.
Okay. And the parking that Ms. Hayes referenced that you will be creating, but you do understand those are public use because they're not
Oh,
fully on
absolutely.
private property?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, when they have the cheerleading school next door wide open, that whole place is covered with cars.
There you
So-
go. Maybe they can use your shelter too.
I'm sorry?
They could use your shelter also if needed.
Well, that has been, they mentioned it a couple of times. Now, every one of these buildings that I'm proposing building here are rated for 250-mile-an-hour winds. So the tenants will be secure, and maybe some of the neighbors too.
Any questions for Mr. Johnson? None? Okay.
I'll go sit down.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we do not have anyone signed up to speak in opposition or in favor of this petition. So at this point, we're going to close public comment and move to board discussion. And help me, Ms. Hayes, on our vote. It's a setback, one setback variance, correct? And
So, yeah, it's considered a setback variance and then a landscape buffer variance.
okay. And earlier, when you described the lot and the zoning, the lot really is unbuildable with the width, the current lot width based on the MG
Right.
zoning.
With it having to be a 50-foot buffer in addition to a 20-foot setback, you can't build anything on that lot.
Okay. All right.
So we don't have to do the special exception?
Yeah, and the special exception is just for the off-street. So
Right.
those two votes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, do you want those read separately or to?
I think, yeah. So we think that you could read them in as the
Right.
same.
Read them and then clarify which it is
Yeah.
for the vote.
But when it comes to this specific site plan, maybe specifying that one that is furthest to the south is going to be a little bit different than this plan.
Ms. Hayes, we did receive an email, correct?
We didn't with this one. Last month, we had some public comment.
It was public comment?
I think based on the petitioner coming last month and has made some substantial modifications, his hands are somewhat tied. And I think Ms. Hayes has mentioned twice in her opening and then another question from the board. This lot, based on its current zoning with neighbors, surrounding properties being zoned MG, the restrictions on setbacks are such you can't build anything here. So when we look at hardship, the hardship is such the zoning won't allow anything to be built. So what do? The neighbors who are non-conforming, legal non-conforming adjacent residential wouldn't be allowed to build something that mirrors them, nor is this individual able to build virtually anything. So keeping along that thought process, if a variance is not granted, this property is deemed unusable for structure. I think based on what Mr. Johnson proposed in last month, it was continued and has come back. He's made modifications. He has reached out to the neighbors and adjusted his building plan for that reason. He understands on the parking, it can be used by the public, but there's also parking on his property across the street from what we've been led to believe or been told by staff, that has had availability. So I think he meets those two things. Based on that, I'm in favor of granting both the variance and the special exception.
Mr. Johnson, first of all, I want to say thank you for being a good neighbor and being considerate of your neighbors. I agree with my fellow board member. I think without the exception, the lot is unbuildable. So I definitely see the hardship here. So I'm definitely in favor of granting a special exception for this.
Mr. Johnson, I also like to thank you because you took what we said and you came back with a plan that I believe could be workable for both you and your neighbor. And I appreciate you considering that. And I do see the hardship and I do see this a special exception. So I'm in favor.
I'm going to have to disagree with my board members on this one. I wish the neighbors would have been able to come today to speak like they did last month. Once we left off last month, it's a situation where, yes, the lot size is 53 feet, and the buffer kicks in due to the fact that the structure where the neighbors reside is a residential. It's a residential structure due to the fact that they've been living in it prior to the zoning ordinance. So they've been there for 70 plus years. That's what makes it a 50-foot buffer requirement. From last month, I was under the impression that they would go back, discuss things, and possibly that front dome, instead of the height being lowered, they would consider just removing it, and you just have the two domes that will pretty much be in line with the backyard with the house, not so much still next door to the house. So I have no issue with the off-street parking, but I do have an issue with the buffer. So with that being the case, I'm going to not be in favor of that.
I went by and I've looked at this so many times, it's very difficult to understand, to see it with the house next door, with the resident next door. But I do understand about the zoning, and if that house were empty for 6 months, it would be not be able to be occupied again. It would have to be commercial. I am in favor of this project. I think it is buildable, and I appreciate the fact that he has come back and he's spoken with the neighbors and he's come back with a plan that seems to be workable and usable. and especially the parking spaces, knowing that they are public. I'm in favor of this.
Ms. Hayes, it looks like it's 2 variances and 1 special exception, just so we're correct. I'm going to read it through, and then I'm going to go back and have a vote on each of the 3. Is that, or do I need to read it 3 times?
Yeah.
I believe if we're going to have any disagreement on any of the votes, we probably need to vote them separately. And it sounds like we may, which is fine. We just need to vote them separately. And I think you can just do them back to back. And I also want to mention, I know you were going to do this, but if you're, I don't know where to put it in.
Could you speak into the mic, Ms. King?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought I was close enough. I do think if there's going to be any disagreement, we need to vote them separately. And it sounds like there might be, so we should just vote them separately for clarity reasons.
So just go ahead and read through it.
Yeah, just for each one, just for clarity. And also, if we want to, and I don't know which one it would go on in terms of, this plan, I think, doesn't exactly reflect the height of the office. And I believe that that was a consideration that many of these board members took into account, was sort of that as a presentation. So we need to figure out where to place that as a conditional requirement on it, if that's what the board wants. And I'll defer that to
I think
Emily.
it would, either of the variances, it would be appropriate to put it as a condition.
Okay, so just the condition is the unit to the left, which is highlighted here, circled, is the height restriction.
I would say the warehouse to the south is limited on the height.
Okay. Catch me if you need to. Let me know. Okay, is there any other any comments from the board? Okay, we're going to close board comments and move to a reading of the petition and a vote. In the matter of ZBA-26-23, John Johnson petitions for a variance from the landscape buffer regulations to construct warehouses on the property located at 2602 30th Street, zoned MG Council District 2, continued from the March 2023 meeting. Voting with Mr. Eatman.
Yes.
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 Okay. The first variance with landscape or buffer regulations has passed. In the matter of ZBA-26-23, John Johnson petitions for a variance from the industrial district setback regulations to construct warehouses on the property located at 2602 30th Street, zoned MG Council District 2, continued from the March 2023 meeting with a condition of a height limitation on the southernmost structure. Voting with Mr. Eatman.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
ZBA-26-23, John Johnson petitions for a special exception from the off-street parking regulations to construct warehouses on the property located at 2602 30th Street, zoned MG, Council District 2, continued from the March 2023 meeting. Voting with Mr. Eatman.
Yes.
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 All 3 of the petitions requested passed.
Okay, so we'll move into our cases to be heard. ZBA 3223, Allen Lane petitions for a variance from the accessory structure regulations to construct a metal garage exceeding 200 square feet on the property located at 3312 5th Street, zoned R3, Council District 1. Here's an aerial view of that property, as well as the zoning map. I don't know what that is. Sorry. That's something just stuck on there. And then a closer aerial view of that property. View from the street, the front of the house. And then this is access from an alley. And that is the current pad as it sits today where this proposed garage is going to be. This is just a little bit further down that alley so you can see. Applicable regulations, the location of accessory structures on residential lots. So it does say that no accessory structure may be closer than 5 feet to any property line, as well as no accessory structure may exceed 200 square feet that is clad in aluminum or other sheet metal siding. Petitioner is requesting a variance to construct a 23-foot by 19-foot, which is approximately 437 square foot, 2-car metal garage that is 12.4 feet in height. The proposed garage will exceed the maximum square footage allowed for metal siding on an accessory structure by approximately 247 square feet. They would like to utilize an existing concrete slab that is 24 foot by 20 foot that previously had a metal carport on it. The slab is about 2 feet from the eastern property line, so the proposed garage will be just under 3 feet from that line, which does not meet that required 5-foot setback for accessory structures. So here is a survey of that lot as it sits today, and this is what we're looking at. So here's an example from the manufacturer of a similar garage to what is being proposed. And then the proposed site plan. Do you have any questions for staff?
Can you go back to the 2 bullet points that it had to meet, please? Prior to that, I believe, right there. So in the petition, there are two issues in the ordinance. Is that right? The setback?
The setback and the size of the metal garage being proposed. So it's hitting both of these.
So for clarity, again, it's 2 distinct votes.
I think so. I mean, if it's going to be obvious, I think just 2 distinct votes is probably going to be easiest for clarity's sake.
So it could be made out of anything other than this aluminum.
Right.
So if they chose to do it in wood or any cement blocks, all of that can be done. It's just because it's aluminum.
Specifically aluminum.
Okay.
And any other medium, as Ms. Coley referenced, would not come before us for that reason.
For
correct?
that reason. So essentially, if they were building it out of any other material, it would only be coming before you for a variance from the setback.
And this part of the ordinance, over 200 feet in aluminum clad or metal clad, all came from
It
around
really,
the tornado?
from post-tornado, we saw a lot of these metal structures being quickly thrown up, and that's what City Council voted on to restrict the size of those.
Okay. Any other questions?
And the slab is currently 3 feet away from the lot line.
It's about 2 feet. What the proposed garage is, they're going to set it back just a little bit on that slab.
So they're going to do something bigger. The slab is 5 feet away, but they're going to do something beyond that slab.
So the slab is 2 feet away,
Okay.
and then what they're proposing is going to be a little under 3 feet. So essentially, the slab itself is 24 foot by 20, and they're proposing a 23 foot by 19. So it's just like sitting right on top of it.
So they could move back to 5 feet. It just would be smaller.
Yeah,
Okay.
they could.
Can you show an aerial view again, please? Thank you.
And it may be a little bit easier. I can go back to the survey if you want me to.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
So that you can see, they've actually got it specifically how far it is. It's not quite even, but 2.2 feet and 2.6 feet.
Thank you.
Do you have any additional questions?
So looking at this, they could move over to where the wood bridge, they can move over to that side, do more over on that side, pour some more concrete, and do it that way. Okay. Any more questions?
Any more questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Alan Lane. I own that house, and I live at 4700 Riva Ridge Drive. And my sons lived in there until Christmas time, and they moved out, and I'm just renovating the house right now. I'm doing a complete makeover of the house. It's a 1920 house, very, very bad condition. So this is really just a matter of that concrete slab. It's a large concrete slab. It was there until a few weeks ago. It had that metal carport. It's one without walls, just that like people put over boats and things like that. It was damaged and we had to take it down. And I'd just like to put a garage there. And this, as you saw, this is a dirt, not unpaved alley. This building would be a lot nicer than the other structures that are in the alley itself. And as far as the setback, in this neighborhood, as you probably are familiar, there's a lot of problems with lot lines and setbacks. It's an old neighborhood. I used to live there and had problems with my property line also. So I think it's in character with the neighborhood, and it would actually be an improvement and gives us off-street parking.
So as Ms. Hayes described, basically you're replacing it with a solid structure, walled structure versus an open-sided structure, metal clad.
Yes, it's steel clad, not aluminum.
Steel clad. Now, you understand if it wasn't for the medium you're using, you wouldn't have to come before us for the skin. If
Yeah.
you used wood or any other type of sheathing on there, okay? And part of the reason it's in the ordinance, and a lot of it was put in with more teeth, so to speak, or size limitations, is post-tornado, a lot was being built hurriedly, rightfully so, to come back, from devastation. But some monstrosities were erected around town. And because of that, that was my understanding for the city staff's push not to put those type structures in. And this would be a little over twice the size of the minimum metal clad that would be allowed. Okay.
Yes, because it's meant to be a garage, not a shed.
Right. But is there a reason you can't comply with the ordinance as it stands? You're choosing metal.
Oh, it's simply a matter of cost and how fast it can be put up. If I put up a wood frame garage, for instance, it would be a lot more expensive. You saw it looks pretty nice, and it's only about $7,000 or $8,000 installed.
But what you're telling me, the reason is it's a cost issue is the reason.
Largely, I'd be honest, it's cost. Yeah.
Any other questions? Do you have anything else you'd like to offer?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't have anyone signed up to speak in opposition or in favor of the petition. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and close public comment and move to board discussion. As Ms. Hayes presented in the ordinance, it wouldn't even be coming for us, other than the setback. This would not be coming before this body if it was any other medium. And I made a few comments on why the city put this in place. To get around or get a variance, in this case, is what's being requested from the ordinance. The problem is it's twice the size when they did that. Think of a yard shed that's metal clad, a tool shed, something very small, kitted. That's what's allowed at 200 feet. This ask is more than double that. And any other medium would be allowed. Ideally, something matching the house, a wood or siding, that matches the house, character of the house. But to the petitioner's point, the reason he can't do it any other way or chooses not to do it is cost. And if you recall, when our opening comments, it's a very hard legal standard, use variant or any type of variance for this board to look at granting. Financial considerations cannot be considered. And so this could be done other ways, and I feel for that from the petitioner, but based on that, I can't approve, or I won't be able to vote in favor because I don't see any legitimate hardship that's been shown. Now, this is 2 votes, and we will vote it that way, Ms. King. That's for the variance. And then we also need a variance from the setback. As the petitioner stated earlier on the setback, this home, I think you said 1927, you know, years, decades prior to any existence of zoning in the city. We understand the problems with lot lines and small lots, you know, from that era, almost 100 years ago when it was platted. So that being said, I don't have an issue next to the alley on the setback or granting that. It's simply the structure and how it's being clad. There's no hardship proven, in my opinion.
I agree with my fellow board member. I definitely understand cost and saving cost, but I also don't see a hardship here. I think that, you know, it could be built with other material. So I'm going to be with my board member, and I'm going to be against the variance for the material, but I don't see a problem with the setback.
Mr. Lane, I agree with my fellow board members. I feel like if you do it in another material that you could build it, and I do understand cost, but that doesn't meet the rule for variance. And then for me, the setback, you could just go the other side, so I don't really see the need to have a setback just because the concrete foundation goes over the line. You could just build the other way. So I don't see a hardship in that one either.
And I agree with Michelle. With the variance, I'm not in agreement with that. And also with the setback, that's just a matter of shifting over. So I'm not in favor of either.
I did drive through that neighborhood, and I think that definitely this is an improvement, of course. But I also have to agree with my board members that I do not see a hardship other than financial, and that unfortunately cannot be considered. The setback, because you do have the space, you are able to adjust it. No, it's not the easiest way to do it, and sorry, but I am not in favor of the setback or the variance.
There are no other comments. We'll move to a reading of the petition and the vote. In the matter of ZBA-32-23, Allen Lane petitions for a variance from the accessory structure regulations to construct a metal garage exceeding 200 square feet on the property located at 3312 5th Street, zoned R3, Council District 1. And this pertains to the metal clad structure. Voting with Mr. Eatman.
No.
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 ZBA-32-23, Allen Lane petitions for a setback or variance to the setback regulations for the accessory structure planned to construct a metal garage exceeding 200 feet on the property located at 3312 5th Street, zoned R3, Council District 1, voting with Mr. Eatman.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
No.
Both of the petitions, both of the votes failed. I might talk to staff in this case after this, go back another route perhaps.
Okay, we'll move on to our next case of the night, ZBA 3423. Oliver Seeley petitions for a special exception to allow an event space on the property located at 3321 15th Street, zoned R4, Council District 1. So here's an aerial view of that property as well as the zoning. And then a closer aerial view. A couple views from the street. Parking area. Applicable regulations, special exceptions for other public and semi-public uses of an educational, cultural, institutional, social, or recreational character, not including correctional or penal institutions, which serve residents of the neighborhood or community. The primary criteria for this is that it must be served by a street adequate in capacity, in the board's opinion, to carry the anticipated volume of traffic without causing unsafe or overly congested conditions. And the discretionary criteria is that the character of the use scale, it must match that of the buildings in the surrounding area. The petitioner is requesting a special exception to use a former church activity center as an event space. The proposal is to use the space for weddings, birthday parties, receptions, and other community-friendly activities. Petitioner has a letter of permission from the adjacent church to utilize their parking lot for overflow parking during events. Petitioner owns most of the houses in the adjacent area and has stated that he will require his tenants to park in specific areas in order to not block the flow of traffic. There are currently not any designated parking spots defined by striping on this property, and the Office of the City Engineer did say that that is going to be a requirement, that parking spaces must be paved and striped. Do you have any questions for staff?
Can you go back to an aerial, please? Okay, so what's we're looking at in that outline box is the former church activity building.
Correct.
Okay. So the parking we're speaking of is what's in there that's paved, needs to be paved and striped?
Correct. That needs to be paved and striped. But you can't see it really from this view. Right across Foster's Ferry is where that church is. They've got a pretty large parking lot that they are going to allow Mr. Seeley to use for events.
And what did fire weigh in?
So fire on this, they did have some concerns about the true occupancy, whether that was something that an architect needed to be involved. The occupancy is going to be something that absolutely is going to need to be addressed. I know Mr. Seeley has a number based on what the church activity center was and what he was told. I believe it was 55 to 70.
Will there be a code study required?
Fire did say potentially there could be a code study required, but they didn't say for sure.
Thank you. Mr. Seeley?
Good evening. My name is Oliver Seeley. I live at 3806 23rd Court East in Tuscaloosa. I recently petitioned for a special exception to allow for an event space to be held at 3321 15th Street. Since that time, I have been recently approached by an individual that would like to use that event space now for a church. So I'd like to change my special exception for an event space to be used for a church.
So I will say, by right with the zoning, it can be a church. If it's just going to be a church, you don't have to ask for a special exception from anything.
Okay.
It's only if you're going to use it for events.
No, I would not be using it for an event space. I'll be using it for a church now.
Okay.
Is the church you're referencing someone approached you, or you're the property owner?
I'm the property owner.
And you're
Someone
going to
approached
be
me.
leasing this property to a church?
Yes, to some individuals that would like to use it as a church.
Okay, so they'll have full rights under your lease agreement to use that. Is that how
Yes.
it'll be structured?
Yes.
Okay.
So in that respect, you don't have to ask for a special exception from anything.
So would he just
He
withdraw?
should request to withdraw.
Yeah, just a request to withdraw.
Okay.
Mr. Seeley, if you will request to withdraw your petition.
Oliver Seeley would like to request for a withdrawal from my petition.
Okay.
Let me ask him one question. So if they decide not to get it, or something happens and they fall through, then would you come back for the special exception for an event space? Would you go on?
Yes, I would have to come back.
So should he go ahead and go through with it? And then if he chooses to rent it, he doesn't have to do any changes if he rents it as a church?
I mean,
Well,
that's,
It will be subject to the 6 months if he withdraws it.
yeah. So he'd have to pull a
he-
business
if,
license.
If you were to withdraw it and it fell through, he would have to wait the 6 months before he could petition to come back.
So if they change their mind, you have to now wait 6 months before you can do anything with your property other than have a church or something that's already approved. So I just want to make sure that you understand that, like, if you withdraw this and then they change their mind, you've got to wait 6 months to
He
come
won't have
back
to
as
wait.
an.
He won't have to wait 6 months.
He
It's
won't?
just, no. If he withdraws it, you don't have to wait. You can come back next month.
Okay.
Not if he requests to withdraw it. Hang on. Yes. Let's check our rules on that.
We're going to verify that, so we want to give him,
Do you,
wait
I
a
have-
few
I have it
minutes?
right here. We'll clarify that.
okay, do you,
If you want to move on to the next one, if you just want to
Table
hold
it.
I
this
just want to
table
make
it
sure
for
that
just a
you don't
moment,
lose your
we'll- we
space
can
and then
confirm
have
that.
to come back and wait 6 months if they change their
understand.
mind.
Okay.
So if you'll wait a few minutes, is that okay?
Yeah,
And then
ma-
we go to the next one?
yeah, Mr. Seeley, sorry for the confusion. If you will, you want to go ahead and move to the next case, and we're gonna, if you will, just please take a seat and let city staff clarify that what they need to do procedurally, and then we'll call you back up. Is that okay?
Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Members of the board, we've clarified, and I will say that I was incorrect, and Mr. Eatman was correct. So very good on Mr. Eatman. It will not be subject to the 6-month limit.
Okay.
So he can withdraw it, and it will not be subject. If it falls through, he can come back and petition the board again. So
Mr. Seeley, I think we've got our answer. If you could step back up, please. Okay, so based on staff's research, if you do withdraw it and something falls through, you do not have to wait 6 months. You will have to petition again through the process, just like you did for this meeting, and come back before this body if that's what you choose to do.
Okay.
Okay?
Is that the best?
Yes.
We're good. All
Okay.
right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so do we vote on it?
Vote on it. Yes, we have to vote on it.
We have to. Okay, all right, thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, we're learning new things. This is good. Okay, we'll move on to our next case, ZBA 3523, Phoenix House Partners in Recovery petitions for a special exception to allow a group home on the property located at 822 35th Avenue, zoned R3, Council District 1. Here's an aerial view of that property as well as the zoning. Then a closer aerial view. This may look a little bit familiar because a few months ago, 826, which is the property directly south of this, did come before you for a similar request. Here's the view from the street. And then that shared parking, again, you can kind of see a little bit of 826, and that was the one that was previously approved from a group home as well. Applicable regulations, this is specifically for a group daycare home. The petitioner is requesting a special exception to allow a group home. They state it will be a supervised residential recovery house. The request is to allow for up to 6 adults to occupy the dwelling at any time. There are several other existing facilities in the area. One is approximately 150 feet from this property. The Phoenix House's main facility is just north of this property, approximately 0.1 miles. Partners in Recovery is a separate entity that works with Phoenix House to provide housing opportunities through various residential properties, and this house specifically is 4 bedrooms. How many questions for staff? We did receive 1 letter in support and 1 letter in opposition of this that were forwarded to the board.
members of the board, this is an unusual situation. It doesn't typically come before the board. And so I want to take just a few moments to discuss the Fair Housing Act, because that is implicated in this request. The Fair Housing Act is a federal law that the city of Tuscaloosa must comply with. The FHA requires the city to make reasonable accommodations in its generally applicable zoning ordinances when necessary to give a handicapped person equal opportunity to use and enjoy a dwelling. Individuals recovering from drug and alcohol addictions, like the ones we're discussing here, do fall within the federal standard for handicapped persons under the Fair Housing Act. As a result, this request from the Phoenix House is subject to the requirements of the FHA. Just because something is subject to the FHA doesn't mean that you have to grant it. Essentially, this board must determine whether the request from Phoenix House is reasonable and necessary. Whether a request is reasonable and necessary is a very case-specific determination. In determining whether something is reasonable, other zoning boards, along with courts who've reviewed those boards, have looked at questions very similar to what we ask in our short-term rentals. Are there enough bedrooms, bathrooms, parking? Have there been any complaints about noise, traffic patterns, crime, anything like that? So very similar to what we sort of look at for our short-term rentals. That's certainly not the only things you can consider, but those are some examples of what have been considered to determine whether or not a request is necessary. In looking at whether or not a request is reasonable, and looking at whether the request is necessary, please note that unlike most of what we do here at ZBA, finances can be considered. I know that that is unusual for us, but that is under the federal law. Other zoning boards and courts have also looked at whether there is a therapeutic effect for having individuals recovering from addiction housed together, and whether refusing to grant the request would require the closure of the home and the displacement of the current tenants. Again, those are not the only things you can consider. I'm just giving you some examples of what some other zoning boards have asked questions about. If after all of this, the board determines that the request is not reasonable and necessary, then you can feel free to deny it. If you find that it is reasonable and necessary, then by federal law, you must grant it. Are there any questions related to the Fair Housing Act?
Now, I know under a variance, we cannot use by law, by state law, we cannot use financial hardship. But being that this is outside of Fair Housing Act and everything you referenced, it's also a special exception.
It is.
So we're not, hardship, so to speak, is not a primary tenet as it is for variance.
It is not.
Okay.
No. And I just mentioned the money because I know that
Right.
we have just had this discussion that, a lot of times we don't consider financial, by case law, that can be considered in Fair Housing Act cases. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if we could have the representative for Phoenix House come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jim Standridge. I'm the lawyer for the Phoenix House, also a board member. I live in Northport, but don't hold that against me. The Phoenix House wishes to get this exception and able to provide housing in a therapeutic environment for approximately 6 more clients, former clients who have stepped up to this level of supervision. We have new board members, but we just asked the board within the last several months to approve a similar exception in the house next door, and that's worked out fine, and thank you for that. The Phoenix House is just right down the block. We have 6 or 7 other houses that are similarly situated, plus the main body of the Phoenix House. The clients, the process is the clients who undergo treatment at the Phoenix House graduate, so to speak, to this less intensive supervision where they essentially live on their own. They work in the community, provide transportation. We do provide some transportation, but that's the accountability of the group and the continuing availability of meetings and counseling and so forth is the therapeutic community. It's modeled all over the country, and it's kind of the thing to do. As you mentioned on the financial hardship, it's impossible to purchase and maintain homes of this nature without having this increased occupancy. There's just not enough, revenue flow to do that. So the Phoenix House, of course, makes no profit, so to speak, off these operations, just providing the homes. Thank you.
Can you tell us, Mr. Standridge, a little bit about this particular house, the structure?
It's just an ordinary single-family house. It was built probably in the 30s. It was, I think, the same family occupied it for many years, and they have all moved off or died off. It's the lady who is the overseer of it now doesn't live there. It's vacant now, and the family wishes to sell it. It has 4. It's very similar to the house next door, except it's a single story, but it has 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, kitchen, normal accoutrements. It has a little bit of parking. We addressed last time it has sufficient parking for I think it has 2 or 3 spaces, but the Phoenix House parking also has a parking lot just 100 yards or less away.
Will the if it's approved, would the residents that are in this level of care, this stage of their treatment process, do they have automobiles?
Most of them don't. Some do. Occasionally, a client does, but normally they avail themselves of the transportation the Phoenix House provides, or public transportation.
How did you all find out about this home being available?
The owner approached us.
Is that how you get most of your homes?
Well, no, ma'am, we built the others. This is only the second one that we've sourced in the community. As we said, the one earlier was next door to this, so obviously she was aware of that. So she came to us and offered to sell it to us.
Mr. Sandridge, do you know approximately the square footage of this house?
I don't. I would guess in the 2,000-foot range. That's a fair guess. I don't know.
About, okay,
Yeah, 2,000 feet.
thank you. That makes a difference to me.
Yes, ma'am.
I know you said 4 bedrooms. Is that pretty standard for you all to, put more tenants than bedrooms in your home? Is that something standard practice?
Well, we're just trying to make it work, make the numbers work, frankly. Obviously, they have to have a decent private living space, but in those houses in that area, they will have, 2 of them will have roommates and 2 will not, if that makes sense.
Now, I recall the case you referenced earlier on the street
Yes,
when
sir.
y'all came before us for a very similar ask.
Yes, sir.
What's been the experience from a management standpoint as far as issues, concerns, problems?
No issues, the residents live there, like it, so it's consistent with the other use in the neighborhood. As we said, the Phoenix House has been there for 35 years. I hope have been good neighbors. People in that neighborhood understand that. It's been no problem at all, and it's been full. There's a, as I'm sure the board knows, there's a tremendous demand for affordable housing, for particularly our clients who are down on their luck, so to speak, and don't have a lot of economic resources. Just getting started back as work and so forth.
Any other questions? Anything else you'd like to offer?
No, sir.
Okay, and one last question. I know this is the progression to get someone back on their feet and, back out into, contributing to society, working, and living independently. Is this the last phase in the recovery process?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The next would be independent living without the accountability, without the therapeutic.
Okay.
I would like to say thank you so much for the information that you sent. It was a lot of information, but it was very, very good.
Thank you. Our people
Explained
try to do
it.
a good job. We're all serious about what we do.
Yeah, thank you.
No other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We do not have anyone signed up to speak in opposition or in favor of the petition, so with that being said, we're going to close public comment and go to board discussion. From what it sounds like from the petitioner's representative, it's very similar to the ask in the last, I believe, 12 months when they came before us on the same street. We had a lot of discussion, if I recall from that case. It was approved. I don't see anything different that, from the petitioner's standpoint, from how they're managing their clients, their purpose, how they will function, and then hopefully graduate these individuals living here to go back out into the world and be productive citizens and live independently. I think that's a much-needed public service in our community and a lot of communities. I'm glad we have it. They have a good track record. But I think, most importantly, what we're tasked to look at, considering this, as Ms. King said and defined it for all of us, is it reasonable and necessary to meet those 2 objectives? I think in this case, it meets both of those. I don't see any reason that it doesn't, and which makes it easier on the vote, but I think it's nailed it. And again, I think it's a necessary and very reasonable request. I'm in favor of granting it.
I also agree with my fellow board member. I do think, I appreciate what you all do for the community. I do have a little concern about the 6 people, but not so much if it's standard practice of what you do. Just kind of like short-term rental. I think anytime you pack too many people into a space, I think it could possibly create issues. But if that's standard practice, that's the only thing I have concern about. But I do appreciate what you all do, and I think you provide a great service to the community.
My concern was at first about the community and so many of this type of housing in the community. But once you said that the owners approach you about it, that lets me know that in the community, that's what they're okay with. And so I have no problem with it.
My concerns are basically the same thing it was with the first time the petitioner came. Flooding a particular area with these houses, I understand the proximity to the main Phoenix house, how that could be an asset to these houses. And again, it's a situation where I would have appreciated the community to come in to give their feedback on it, whether for or against it. And also with the number of individuals, with the 6 unrelated individuals in the 4-bedroom, unrelated adults, not just individuals. That caused some hesitation with me as well. But as we stand right now, I'll be in favor.
I have to agree with my fellow board members. I was concerned about the size of the house when I drove by and looked at it, finding out, though, that it is 2,000 square feet. Putting 6 people in 2,000 square feet, I think, is very doable. I do appreciate what Phoenix House does, and I also, as I said earlier, appreciate getting all the information about it. I think it is a good service for the community. I have to agree with Paul. A concern is putting them all in one area, but we can understand why. And as I understand, there have not been any problems or issues with the other homes. So I am in favor also.
If there are no more comments from the board, we'll move to a reading of the petition and vote. In the matter of ZBA-35-23, Phoenix House Partners in Recovery petitions for a special exception to allow a group home on the property located at 822 35th Avenue, zoned R3, Council District 1, voting with Mr. Eatman.
Yes.
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 Petition passed.
Okay, we'll move on to our next case, ZBA 3623. Patrick Andrus petitions for a use variance to occupy a dwelling that is not legally able to be occupied on the property located at 2711 6th Street, Zone BGO DROD Council District 1. So here's an aerial view of that property as well as the zoning, just to the southeast of Capitol Park. Aerial view. And then here's a view from the street. And here's the rear of the property. And then this is just kind of showing you a little bit of the interior of this property. These were pictures that I pulled off of the Zillow listing. Applicable regulations. So a single-family dwelling is not a permitted use, nor is it a special exception in the BGO zoning district. District is requesting a use variance to occupy a dwelling that is not legally able to be occupied. The house was constructed in 1887 and moved to its current location in 1910 and was used as a home prior to receiving its commercial zoning designation, which is BGO. Per the petitioner, the home was purchased by his father in 1976 and was used as a law office, so therefore it lost its non-conforming status to be occupied as a dwelling. Petitioner states that no commercial upgrades were made to the property to turn it into a commercial building or meet those commercial building standards. The house is 6 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms. Properties on either side of this structure are also zoned BGO, but they are currently being used for commercial businesses. There is an existing gravel lot, which I showed y'all a picture of, that's in the rear of the property that has been used as the designated parking area for this structure since 1976. Do y'all have any questions for staff?
I do. The drive to get to it, that is a city, is that a alley?
It is. It's considered an unimproved alley, but it is an alley.
And and you may have covered it, I may have missed it, as far as the parking, that the existing parking in the rear that Ms. Ford referenced, the egress to, that's gravel now.
It is. So it's a little bit overgrown, but you can kind of see it a little bit. So this continues on back here. And this is the parking area.
Okay. And that will, from the city standpoint, how will that need to be treated?
So he will need to put in more gravel if the board feels as if that should be.
So as a condition, the parking lot will have to be, or the parcel parking pads will have to be gravelled.
Do you have any additional questions?
Any more? Okay, thank you.
Good evening. This is, I actually used to work with my dad at this law office. My name is Patrick Andrews.
Sir, if you could just give, for the record, your name and address, please.
Yes, sir. My name is Patrick Andrews. I currently live at 1812 Indian Creek Circle, Vestavia Hills, Alabama. I'm a former resident of Tuscaloosa. I actually used to work with my father, David Andrews, at this law office from 2011 to 2018. He passed in 2017, at which time the office became mine. Prior to 1910, the actual location of the office was right next door, which is what is currently owned R&R Cigar, which has a liquor license. And it was moved by the Maxwell family to its current location in 1910. It was originally built in 1887. This home has been in my family for almost 50 years now. My dad buying it in 1976. Since the pandemic has happened, attorneys and younger attorneys no longer need paralegals. Most all of these offices in this area have older attorneys in them that use a lot of paralegals. And the best use of the property is moving away from what was a revitalized area in the 1970s when attorneys were moving in to now they're moving out. I've attempted to sell the building as a commercial use. I've had no bites for that. I do want to make sure that the beauty of this historic building and this historic area is upkept, and I want to turn this into the highest and best use for the city of Tuscaloosa while keeping a historic building in this area. Back behind here, we have Game Day condos. There are more, they tore down P. Lamro and Associates, built multifamily and other stuff recently, and I feel that keeping a beautiful building like this in this area and allowing it to go back to its original use is the best use of this property. The bathrooms were never changed from when it was a house. I know that Owens and Millsaps, they changed theirs to a commercial use, so there's no actual showers or bathrooms. Now they can only use it for commercial because it would cost too much to change it back for them. But this house is original use, needs to go back for that. And so I want to keep up the area. I'd be happy to re-gravel the lot. We used to park 9 vehicles back here when I was working here.
Question for staff. Ms. Hayes, is this similar to the one off of Greensboro, just off of Greensboro? Those 3 there?
Right. It was a similar request in that it was a historical home that it lost its non-conforming status because it was also zoned BGO.
Any questions for Mr. Andrews?
On your home, are you able to make it 2 separate areas, 2 kitchens, 2 bedroom, or 2
No, ma'am,
areas?
not without moving walls or anything like that.
Okay, so it's not set up any kind of duplex or?
No, ma'am, it's a single-family home. It's what its always use has been. In order for me to make it as a duplex, I would have to add some walls and cordon off and do some other things.
So the back entrance does not go to a certain area, it goes to the entire home as well as the front?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
I would also be the one managing this home, so it would stay with me managing.
Okay.
And I actually currently manage 2 Airbnbs from a distance in Florida. I have 2 homes down there, and I self-manage those as well because I feel like I'm going to be the one that wants to get the best guest in so that we don't have issues. So one of the things, I put Ring cameras up there. We make sure that we try to enforce a quiet time in our property because we don't want parties at our property. We want to take the best use of the property and not cause issues. Also, we put noise monitors in, so if there is a party, we can get advance notice and try to stay ahead of issues. We also require a security deposit to try to keep out the partiers, I guess would say, that would cause issues.
I would be very interested in the noise monitors. I haven't heard that one yet.
Yes, ma'am. It's something new that hooks up wirelessly, and I get notices on my phone about it.
Is it a decibel thing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Andrus, if your petition is considered for approval, a condition would be on putting gravel on that lot, basically re-graveling where the parking would be. And
Yes,
that's,
sir.
and obviously it's a tight space looking at the picture in front of you, egressing between the fence and that existing parking pad of your neighbor around the utility pole. So that basically would be, and staff can get with you, is that fair, city engineer's office on what needs to be gravelled there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir. The entire lot is actually gravel, and I'd be happy to re-gravel it
Okay.
to meet those conditions. And it was used, like I said, for well, back when there was trees there when I was a little kid. It was used as a parking lot for years, and we've had gravel added there over time. But since I got married and moved out of town, it has fallen into where the weeds have kind of taken over the gravel lot.
Sure.
You said you live out of town?
Yes, ma'am. Vestavia Hills, Alabama now.
Okay, thank you. You did say that.
Do you have someone that's going to manage this property here locally while you're in Vestavia, or will there be someone on call? I mean, I know we're just voting on.
So,
Yeah, let's hold that.
Yes, hold it. Okay, okay.
So my brother actually lives here in town. He
Okay.
would be my on-call person, and I'm only a 50-minute drive away to come take care of issues, but I haven't had any issues with managing my properties in Panama City Beach from Vestavia Hills, Alabama. I've done that for well over a year. I'm a super host on Airbnb and a premier host on VRBO.
Mr. Andrus, we'll get to that in the next one. That
Oh, yes, sir.
pertains to the next
Yeah.
one. So let's get,
Yes, sir.
but you have anything else to offer on this one?
If I can answer any other questions, I'm happy to.
Good. I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Appreciate it. Okay, we do not have anyone signed up to speak in opposition or in favor of this petition, so we will at this point close public comment and go to board discussion. I think the House, and one of my questions to Ms. Hayes earlier, this is very similar, just the ask on the use variance for the zoning in a former home that was historic, that had turned into, as things change and evolve, it evolved in the 70s and forward to being a lot of office space, commercial office space, a lot of lawyers' offices, as the petitioner referenced, are in this area. Now things are changing back to more of a residential flavor in the neighborhood. That being said, the restrictive nature or loss of the ability to be grandfathered in as a home under the current zoning is what we have looked at in other similar instances where the home is a home. It was built as a residence years ago, many, many, many decades prior to zoning coming into effect. So based on that, in absence of full rezonings in the entire area, we have granted use variances in this exact scenario in the downtown area. So based on that, I think everything has been met to move for this use variance, and I'm in favor of granting it.
I'm also in favor.
I agree with my fellow board members.
I'm in favor.
I think he answered all the questions that I was concerned with, so I'm also in favor.
Okay. If there are no further comments from the board, we'll move to a reading of the petition and a vote. In the matter of ZBA-36-23 Cahaba Lily Properties LLC, Patrick Andrus petitions for a use variance to occupy a dwelling that is not legally able to be occupied on the property located at 2711 6th Street, Zone BGO, DROD, Tourist Overlay District, Council District 1, voting with Mr. Eatman.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to stop. I need to add the condition. Same reading. I need to add a condition that the parking lot in the rear that has grown over needs to be re-gravelled. Voting with Mr. Eatman.
Yes.
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 Petition passed.
Okay, moving on to ZBA 3723. Patrick Andrews petitions for a special exception to allow for the short-term rental of a dwelling for more than 45 nights on the property located at 2711 6th Street. It's on BGO, DRD, TOD, Council District 1. Here's an aerial view of the property as well as the zoning, and a closer aerial view. This is the same property. Applicable regulations. So this property is located within the Tourist Overlay District, which means short-term rental is allowed by right. However, it is allowed by right for up to 45 nights unless specified differently by the zoning board. This dwelling has 6 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms. They are requesting for more than 45 nights. Do y'all have any questions for staff?
Are there any other short-term rentals in the Tourist Overlay District? We didn't show us that.
So there, I don't have a map of that, but there in this area specifically, there are a decent amount of short-term rental, especially in the game day condos right behind it. There are a few licenses there.
Any with more than 45 nights?
We have not seen any that have been approved historically since 2019 when this ordinance was put into place, where it's been more than 45 nights.
And if in the Tourist Overlay District, like you stated, Ms. Hayes, it doesn't have to come before this body.
Correct.
Up to 45 nights.
Up to
The
45.
only reason is the petitioner is going to ask for more than 45 nights.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, my name is Patrick Andrus. I live at 1812 Indian Creek Circle, Vestavia Hills, Alabama. And I'm requesting for an exception to allow for more than 45 nights because I believe that would be the highest and best use of this property and allowing me to get the best guest in while at the same time my research has shown that potentially the property would be occupied about 30% of the year, which would be about 90 days maximum. That would allow for, graduation week, Good Friday week, when the parents come into town for honors week and stuff like that, on top of football season and potentially a few basketball games. It would be the highest and best use. The other potential use would be to have short-term nurses come in, midterm rental with nurses coming in on that. But it would allow me to keep it occupied, but at the same time not occupied too much because I don't want to have the wrong kind of guests come in. So thus what we talked about earlier, noise monitoring for those guests, keeping the rates high enough to keep the guest out. At my other properties I have that I mentioned, I don't lower the rates in the off season down at the beach because I would rather it stay not booked than get the wrong guest in. But so this would just give me a little bit of wiggle room to get above the 45 nights without breaking any regulations with the city.
Any questions? Do you have anything further from the first petition?
No, he answered it the first time.
I want to make sure you said 90 nights was your max. Is
So
that what,
I would-
did I understand you correctly?
Yes, ma'am. By my research, it would be occupied at a high enough ADR that I'm comfortable renting it to somebody. That's the average daily rate, about 30% of the year, which would be roughly 90 nights.
Any other questions?
And then I have a question for the city. Just like with any other rental, long-term rental, he could rent it out over 30 days and not have to come, like for nurses that come through, he can just do that.
Right, for more than 30 consecutive nights. It would be subject to our occupancy restrictions, but they could do that.
And Ms. Hayes, in the tourist overlay district, how is parking impacted?
So within the tourist overlay district, we just consider what staff determines as the amount of off-street parking that could be allowed. I think with the re-graveling of the lot, it would definitely help with that off-street parking.
Okay, so this is this is unusual, unlike what normally comes before this body in a short-term rental petition. We're just looking at the 45 nights, if we grant that or not. None of the other criteria that we look at.
Mm-mm.
All right. Is everybody good with that? Okay.
What about the renewal? So he doesn't have to come before us for renewals or anything. Each year is just
Staff.
No, it's just if he's approved to do, however, if it's more than 45 nights, that would be each year unless there was an issue in which we needed to bring him back, a verified complaint.
Can we set a number of nights? Or if we say more than 45, he can do as many as he wants?
Absolutely.
But we can set a number.
You can set a number.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned that there are other houses in the tourist overlay district already that's doing STRs. Are any of those houses over 45 nights?
They're not.
Okay, anything else you have for us?
I think I've looked up those houses on Airbnb, and those houses are a little bit smaller, and this one's a 4,000 square foot house. And so they're easier to get travel nurses in and midterm rentals in that are over 30 days in. A bigger home will not rent to that as much. There may be somebody, but typically a travel nurse wants a 2 to 3 bedroom, and there'll be a couple of them that come in. They're not looking for the bigger houses that potentially have a little bit more upkeep for them while they're in there. So the highest and best use for the property would be to allow more than 45 nights due to the size of the home and the amount of parking in the back once I re-gravel the lot.
You don't have anything else? Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, sir.
Okay. We do not have anyone signed up to speak either in opposition or in favor of the petition, so we will be closing public comment and go to board discussion. As you may, the audience, you may be able to see from some of our questions, this is a little different ask, because if the petitioner had gone with 45 nights, no one, it wouldn't come before this body. It would just be straight administrative approval in the tourist overlay district. That's part of the city code. That's been in the code. And it changes some of the other criteria we normally look at. But from what and we're not looking at off-street parks, bedrooms, et cetera, what's presented solely at the nights, the number of nights. Now, per the ordinance, 45 nights is what's allowed as a max. Even on the other short-term rentals that have to come before us initially and then previously for approvals, the maximum we've ever done is 45 nights. Usually this is kind of would be the first one if we go over. I understand the petitioner's comments of his perceived best use. Understand that. Understand the profit seeking in it as well. Yeah, we're all capitalists here, but that's the part of the sticking point of not overdoing something. To the petitioner's point, he mentioned games, which is common. Obviously football games. Graduations, parents' weekends, things of that nature. That's what quite a few of the STRs in town are rented for. Um, I still think that number of 45 nights gives the ability to take advantage of those and profit. One other opportunity that the petitioner, and it was noted, has, it still can be used in long-term rental, which is over 30 nights, in 30 nights or 31 night groups, or 2 months, 3 months, what have you, for traveling nurses or whomever who may need it for a longer period of time. So I think that ability is there from the revenue potential. So I'm still in favor of just granting the 45 nights. And then obviously longer term rentals are obviously an option for the petitioner.
I also agree. I think in order to remain consistent, I think I would like to stick to the 45 nights as well.
Yes, 45 nights. Because if we just say, we wouldn't have a number. You could just rent it out every night if we don't say something. So, and then what would be the number, magic number? So I just feel like we need to stick with the 45, because you would be the only person that could do more, and I don't see a reason for that. So no, for me, I don't understand.
I agree with my other board members. I'm comfortable with leaving it at 45 nights maximum.
I also am in agreement. 45 nights, I think, is the maximum to, I mean, I realize this is a unique and peculiar, different petition than we've ever had. And driving around, the area seems appropriate, certainly, for short-term rentals. But I still appreciate the consistency of the board, and I am in favor of 45 nights.
If there are no more comments, we'll move to a reading of the petition and a vote. In the matter of ZBA-37-23, Cahaba Lily Properties LLC, Patrick Andrus petitions for a special exception to allow for short-term rental of a dwelling for more than 45 nights on the property located at 2711 6th Street, Zone BGO-DROD in the Tourist Overlay District in Council District 1. And the voting affirmative would be for more. So obviously a no vote is capping 45, just for clarity. Voting with Mr. Eatman.
No.
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 Petition failed.
Okay, we'll move into our short-term rentals for the night. ZBA 3823, WM Premier Properties petitions for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a property located at 1008 19th Street, zoned R4, Council District 2. Here's an aerial view of that property as well as the zoning, just southwest of Central High School. And this is a little confusing. The structure is there. It's just a brand new structure. The house has gotten all its permits. It has a CO. It's good to go. This is just built very quickly right before we get an aerial view of that. So here's some nearby short-term rentals. Here's a view of that house and the driveway. Applicable regulations. This is a new short-term rental request. The house is 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, no violations or complaints. They are requesting for 3 vehicles and 6 adults, but if approved, staff recommends 2 vehicles and 4 adults. Do you have any questions for staff?
My name is John West. I'm president of Premier Properties. Of course, you know the address of the house. I'm actually from Rome, Georgia. 100 North Avenue is the address of the property, or our business there. Premier Properties, basically at this point, we only have commercial properties there in Rome. I'm not a Georgia fan, even though I live there, so roll tide to that. But we just became interested in getting a property close to the school to short-term rent for school activities, families to be able to come, because there does seem to be shortages, because we try to find places here to stay all the time, and it's kind of tough. So, and you know, it's a business transaction for us, and we have put together a lot of rules that we intend to enforce. We've already installed outside cameras that have audio monitoring, so I can see it all on my cell phone, anything that's going on outside the property. We don't intend to rent to anybody less than 25 and families. So I'm not really a good speaker, so I'll let you guys ask questions.
Okay, no, you're doing fine, sir. Question, you mentioned it's an investment, you're out of Rome, Georgia.
Yes, sir.
What was here prior to you purchased the lot? Was it vacant, or was there an
No,
old
sir.
home?
I bought it. We had been looking at other properties here in town, and they just had got the certificate of occupancy. Mr. Giles had built that house. We looked at it on Saturday and bought it that night.
Okay, so it was built, you just bought a new home?
Yes, sir. It's a brand new house, and only thing we had him to do after we bought it is, put gutters up and pour the driveway back longer. We could actually park 4 or 5 cars on the concrete without getting in the backyard. Had him to finish the privacy fence, pour a patio back there. So,
Ms. Hayes, could you pull up a street view, please? I see in your request that was on your previous slide, you're requesting 3 vehicles and 6 adults.
yes, sir.
Okay. With a single width driveway, what's represented here, under the city's short-term rental regulations, first of all, there's no off-street parking, even if it's legal on the curb in front of the home.
Right.
When a property is engaged legally in short-term rental, all of the vehicles have to be parked legally off-street.
Right.
And what we don't allow to do in stacking, where you've got one car parked in front of the other, the maximum that we will consider is 2 cars stacked. Because what happens is someone's got to move to let car A out, car B has to back out.
Right.
If you get into where you're backing 2 cars to let one out, what typically happens, path of least resistance, especially a guest not familiar with it or is serious about the regulations, would back out and then go assume to park on the street, go back in the home. So what that's doing is bringing cars off. Even though it's legal for everyone else to park there, under the short-term rental regulations, the ordinance requires off-street parking. So based on that alone, we would only allow 2 off-street parks to consider. But that also changes the formula on your number of adults. Regardless of the bedrooms, you're asking for 6 and 3, 6 adults and 3 vehicles. What was recommended by city staff based on that will be 4 adults maximum if it's considered, and 2 cars off street.
That would be fine. The only reason I put it that way is because if you open that gate, the concrete goes back, and I wasn't aware of that stacking rule.
Yeah.
So that was the only reason I put down on the form
Okay.
that we could park 4 cars. I was just trying to be realistic about.
But that's what dictates in large part that
Right.
number. So just so you're aware of that.
Yeah, that's fine.
And now you mentioned your business in Georgia, and you mentioned cameras and remote monitoring.
Yeah.
Is there a physical presence in this community?
Yeah, Mia Eubanks, the real estate agent that I bought it through, has agreed to be my local person, and I've got Mr. Giles I bought the house from. He's going to do the yard work and all general maintenance for me.
So you said Miss Eubanks?
Mia Eubanks, yes.
Okay, she's going to be a 24/7
Yes.
contact? Is she reside in Tuscaloosa?
Yes.
Okay, so any issues that would come up, is she the number that the tenant will call?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and she is doing this on other properties perhaps? Do you know?
I don't think she's doing it on other properties. She just agreed to do it for us.
Because that's of a big concern for this board, and having a responsible party here that
Right.
can handle any situation that would be called on.
Right. Yeah, she agreed to do that and told me I could use her number and her name.
you mentioned other properties. Do you do short-term rentals in other locales?
Not yet. That's something we're just starting to get into.
Okay, so
We have a 30,000 square foot commercial building in Rome, Georgia that we lease at this point.
do you have rules and regulations prepared?
Yes, I got a whole list.
Okay. And of course, those have to be posted, and you read through the guidelines the city has on what you have to do, required to do.
Okay, I didn't realize that they needed to be turned into anyone yet.
Well, I don't know, and help me, Ms. Hayes, if he has to turn them in, or it's just the posting of them there on site.
Sorry, I missed that. What was
The
the
rules and regulations, is that
Yes.
something that's included in your packet that to turn in or not?
So it's not. It's just something that needs to be posted in the house or either given to the tenants whenever they rent from you.
Every short-term rental I ever did, they gave you that before you checked in.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I do have one question. This property is pretty close in proximity to a school. Do you have any screening processes that you go through with your short-term renters, or
Well,
is there any kind of background checks being done, or?
Well, I don't know that that's a possibility, to
Okay.
be honest with you. I haven't checked into any whether there's any background checks or anything, but we do intend to rent to families and question them pretty heavily before we rent that and make sure that it is somebody over the age of 25.
Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. West.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, we do not have anyone signed up to speak in either opposition or in favor of the petition, so we will close public comment and move to board discussion. I think based on the House looking at it and explaining that to the petitioner, city staff has recommended, if it is approved, for a maximum of 2 vehicles, 4 adults, obviously parked off street, and I would say for a probationary 1 year of a total of 30 nights in the calendar year. Based on the petitioner, he has contacted his real estate agent, who's in agreement to be the local contact here. If that's posted with a 24-hour availability on that, the petitioner did mention posting cameras. I've heard that twice tonight. That's probably a smart idea as a landlord to monitor the surroundings of the property. You can see real time if there is an issue, and hopefully that helps on addressing things or bringing that up to the appropriate parties that need to be contacted. But based on that, I'm in favor of granting it under those terms.
I agree with my fellow board member. I think I'm in favor of the short-term rental here. I think he's got everything in place. Again, I do have some concerns about it, the proximity to the school, but I am in favor of approving it on a probationary period.
I agree with my fellow board members.
I agree. I'm in favor as well with the 4 adults, 2 vehicles, 30 nights for the term of 1 year.
I'm also in favor of 4 adults, 2 vehicles, 30 nights in 1 year.
And Ms. Hayes, last month, I know we've changed this, the caveat on the top. Are we reading that like we have in the past?
So you don't have to read it anymore. It's something that we've written into the code. The 1 year probationary period, as well as the limitation for that first year for 30 nights, has also been written in. So essentially with this, because that is all in the code, all you have to read at this point is the conditions on the adults and vehicles.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, moving to a reading of the petition and vote in the matter of ZBA-38-23, WM Premier Properties petitions for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a property located at 1008 19th Street, zoned R4 in Council District 2, with the following conditions: a maximum of 4 adults, a maximum of 2 vehicles parked off-street, a maximum of 30 nights in a one-year probationary period. Voting with Mr. Eatman.
Yes.
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 The petition passed. Now, if you could address
City
Ms.
staff.
Hayes. We're done with the vote. It might be best suited for Ms. Hayes. Okay.
Okay, we'll move on to our next case, CBA 3923. Brian Blocker petitions for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a property located at 1388 Southern Gardens Drive, zoned R4, Council District 5. Here's an aerial view of that property as well as the zoning, and then a closer aerial view. Again, this is another one that may look familiar. This was under a previous owner. They also came through. This is right south of the lofts, some nearby short-term rentals. It's still got the license on there because that was fairly recent, but that is some nearby. Here is a view from the street. Applicable regulations. This is a new short-term rental request. The house is 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. No violations or complaints under this owner. They are requesting for 3 vehicles and 6 adults. If approved, staff does recommend 3 vehicles and 6 adults if 1 vehicle is parked in the garage. Do you have any questions for staff?
I do. I have one. The other short-term rentals in the area, have you received any complaints on those that you're aware of
So
in that neighborhood?
there have been some issues, not necessarily specifically related to short-term rentals. I think more so associated with long-term rentals in this specific neighborhood. We've had a few different police reports that have happened for some things that have happened in here, but not specifically for the short-term rentals.
All right, thank you.
I think that's good. Thank you. Mr. Blocker?
Good evening. My name is Brian Blocker. I live at 11435 Stella Way in Northport. Property in question is 1388 Southern Gardens Drive. This is Tanner Ashcraft, my property manager.
Yes, I'll be managing this property for him.
Just if your name and address too, please.
Tanner Ashcraft, 903 Heritage Drive.
What can you tell us about, I know recent purchase of the property, is that right? You're going to be managing, so Mr. Ashcraft, what's your experience with short-term rental properties?
Yes, so I've been managing long-term rentals of my own since 2014, but short-term in particular, I have my own personal short-term rental, been in operation since September 2022, so right at the start of football season last year. Over that stretch of time, I've got 32 reviews across the platforms, VRBO, Airbnb. They're all 5-star reviews. We use, like a lot of people said, we use the cameras every entrance. We also show the yard and driveway. We want to know the cars are parked in the right spot, and we want to know that they brought the amount of cars they said and that they're not parked in our yard. We use noise monitors as well. Those noise monitors keep track of the level of noise decimal of the noise, and as soon as it goes over a certain threshold that we have, it's a little bit higher during the day, and then at nighttime we crank it down even lower during quiet hours. But as soon as that happens, we get notified in real time. Hey, noise is over a certain threshold. If it lasts for at least 10 minutes, we send a message immediately. Hey, it's a bit noisy. We need to keep the noise down. It actually happened this weekend. It was rented. My personal rental was rented for A-Day. The noise got up. It was around noon. I think they were getting ready for A-Day, and it was a small group, only 3 of them renting it. I get the notification. We send them a message. My monitor updates me in real time when the noise is going, and immediately it's cut down. We didn't have one more noise complaint over the whole weekend. Or it wasn't a complaint, noise alert. It takes it a step further. So it gauges the amount of people in your property. It counts Bluetooth devices. So if you have a property for 6 people and it's reading 30 Bluetooth devices and it's noisy, of course we look at the monitor, at the cameras. We can see who came in and out. We can see the number of cars. Everything says party, then we can shut it down. I haven't had to go that far, but we have the tools in place to shut it down. And anybody that's ever managed long-term rentals understands that you get a bad tenant with a long-term rental, it's a lot worse than a bad guest in a short-term rental. Tenants have a ton of rights. It's hard to get them out. And of course, we monitor these short-term rentals a lot closer because we have the tools to. I don't know when there's a party at my long-term rentals until a neighbor calls or, cops are called or something like that. Well, I'm on top of it before the party even starts at our short-term rentals. Of course, we do the rules and regulations like anybody else. We have them sign rental agreements. So I don't know if there's anything else I need to, any questions you'll have with us.
You mentioned your experience with short-term rental was the one from 2022, last football season?
Yes.
Was that here, obviously here in Tuscaloosa?
It is. It's not in the city. It's in the police jurisdiction. So I have to have a license, but I've never had to come before.
Okay, so with that particular one that's in this locale, how are you're the point of contact?
I'm the point of contact, yes.
So you're available 24/7. I know you mentioned the cameras and your experience with that as far as monitoring, which that is a good thing. It seems to be a theme tonight, so hopefully that'll carry over. What have you had any responses outside of your cameras and noise that you've had to address? Any situations this year?
No. So again, other than the message, and that's not a neighbor calling saying, hey, we've got problems. It wasn't a party. But if it lasts at least 10 minutes, that's when we're sending a message regardless. It might be the TV's too loud or something like that. We check, as soon as I got that, we send the message out, and of course I'm checking the cameras, what in the world's going on. And there was not, it was the amount of cars that were supposed to be there. Of course we don't have cameras inside or anything like that, but we have access to see the exterior doors, and so we know who accessed the property. So it was just the guests that were there. And again, we never got another alert, so they cut it down immediately.
Okay. And this question's for the owner. City engineering, we've looked at the parking scenario. Like I said, this was approved under a different owner prior to you purchasing it. How is the property used outside of potentially doing short-term rental? Is it vacant?
It has been, yes, sir.
So is that your plan to keep it vacant and do short-term rentals if approved? Now the garage, city engineering report, their office, they suggested the only way to park more than the two pads out front without stacking and the minimum depth off-street was to utilize the garage.
Correct.
Is there anything in the garage?
There is now, but there will not be.
Okay, because that's a hard hurdle over the occupancy.
Yes.
So that would need to be kept vacated because I know it's a relatively small footprint and it looks like a small single-car garage.
Yes, sir.
As far as egress. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be empty.
There's like moving boxes in there.
Right.
Okay.
That'll be removed.
Okay. Any other questions?
I got a question for city staff. It was previously a short-term rental. Were there any complaints
There were. From my understanding and my discussion with the previous owner, it was not with the short-term renters, it was with the long-term renters. Okay. And it was really, the main issues were parking in the street. This is a pretty narrow cul-de-sac, so that was causing some issues with parking halfway in the street and on the driveway. And obviously with the short-term rental, that would not be allowed.
Can you go to the street view, please? Actually, I don't know how parking is not yellow curbed here and allowed. I mean, you really can't park with that width. Fortunately, with short-term rental, that's not even an option. That's not allowed, but I can see where anybody in the road would be an issue. So, did y'all have anything else for us? Good? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we do not have anyone signed up to speak either in opposition or in favor of the petition, so we will be closing public comment and moving to board discussion. You know, the house, even though it was a different owner, was previously approved for short-term rentals. Fortunately, well, I say fortunately, the owner is here and present. His representative, Mr. Ashcraft, has experience in long-term and short-term. He said one in the area, Tuscaloosa area, in police jurisdiction now. So there is a contact, a 24-hour contact. I do appreciate, and we hear these all the time, but tonight we've heard 3 different petitioners reference cameras and at least 2 with noise monitoring. I think the last one is also, you could track the counts on the Bluetooth of how many folks are there to keep an alert. I think that is a extremely helpful tool for people moving forward. But we're glad to hear that. It's another screening, quick screening device. Based on all that, the petitioner's representative who will be managing it has stated his experience. He is in the community. Based on that, I think following city staff's recommendations for consideration, a maximum of 3 vehicles parked off-street, the garage being part of that condition, having full access to, total of 6 adults for 1 probationary year and 30 nights in that year.
I agree with my fellow board members.
I'm in agreement. I don't see any problem.
I agree, I'm in favor.
I agree as well.
If there are no other comments, we will move to a reading of the petition and a vote in the matter of ZBA-39-23. Brian Blocker petitions for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a property located at 1388 Southern Gardens Drive, zoned R4 in Council District 5, subject to the following conditions: a total of 6 adults, 3 vehicles parked off-street, with a further condition, 1 of those 3 vehicles must be parked in the garage, for a total of 30 nights in a 1 probationary year period. Voting with Mr. Eatman.
Yes.
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 Petition passed.
Okay, moving on to case ZBA 4023. Tanner Ashcroft petitions for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a dwelling for more than 45 nights on the property located at 2407 Olympus Drive, zoned R3, Council District 3. I will make a note on this one. The petitioner reached out to me today. They no longer want to request for more than 45 nights. They want the amount of nights that the board thinks is acceptable. So I will just make that note, but this is what is written on the legal notice, so we got to present it in that way. Here's an aerial view of that property, as well as the zoning. And then a closer aerial view. Here's the view from the street. Applicable regulations. This is a new short-term rental request. The house is 4 bedrooms and 2.5 bathrooms. No violations found or complaints. Again, they aren't requesting for those 90 nights anymore. The request is now just for 4 vehicles and 8 adults. If approved, staff recommends 4 vehicles and 8 adults, with 2 vehicles being parked in the garages. Do you have any questions for staff?
Can you go back to the aerial that showed okay, that one. Okay, so the lot, is that common space to the right of that boundary?
It is.
Okay, and then that's a common space at the rear between the houses?
Correct.
Any questions? Thank you.
We did receive 10 emails in opposition, as well as a petition with 68 signatures that was forwarded to all of you for review.
Okay, Mr. Ashcraft?
Tanner Ashcraft, 903 Heritage Drive. I know y'all just heard a good spill of mine about how we manage the properties. I will say we're pretty stern up front about our policies, about our no party, no event. Of course, there's plenty of venues in Tuscaloosa to go party at, and we don't want that venue to be our house that we're renting. I've actually had guests inquire or request a book, and when they receive our message, that gets sent out immediately, and it's crystal clear that, hey, we're not tolerating parties here. I've actually had guests say, I'm sorry, I'm afraid we're looking to have a better time than that. Or we're looking to have a big cookout or whatever, and they've actually pulled their inquiry or request the cancellation. Of course, that's granted. We're trying to get the right people. This particular house is a second home for the owner. So he does, him and his wife, they frequent Tuscaloosa. So they will be here, certain game days and whatever. They wanted to, see if they could share their home a few nights a year, while they're not here. The 90-day petition, or 90 nights, that was sent in by Mr. Trimmer. He's not from here. He simply read the petition and saw that it asked the question on what you're asking for, so he thought, heck, I'll ask, what I want. So when we changed our mind, it wasn't that simple. It was more or less me saying, hey, they've never done this before, so we might as well just stick to the script of what they typically grant. So that was the reason for that. Any other questions?
Yeah, based on your previous comments in the case, you're the primary contact, just
I'm the
as you
primary
described.
contact. We'll have all the cameras showing the exterior, smart locks, noise monitors. We'll monitor this any way we can. I have messages that go out saying, hey, one of our top priorities is respecting our neighbors, not only the property, but our neighbors. We need everybody to be friendly for anything, to work. We don't want to have to fight all the time, whether it's this property or any. So we, again, try to make that super clear to the guest up front. And it's been pretty successful in my experience.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we've got 3 people signed up to speak in opposition. And is it Connie, is it Burris? Burns?
Hi, I'm Connie Burns, 9491 Crete Circle. I'm here on behalf of residents of Neptune's Cove. We appreciate your time tonight. We're coming to you as extremely concerned residents of Neptune's Cove and the lakes in objection to the request for short-term rentals in our neighborhood. We feel that this may be detrimental to our neighborhood, not only to Neptune's Cove, but also to the lakes and other neighborhoods in the area. There have been almost 70 neighbors that have signed the petition opposing short-term rentals. This opposition to short-term rentals in our neighborhood comes from young families, retirees, widows, professionals, grandparents. It truly runs the gamut. Residents don't feel safe because it opens up a more transient group in the neighborhood. Multiple neighbors have expressed a reason for their living in Neptune's Cove. Specifically to get away from the hustle and bustle and a more quiet, family-oriented, homeowner-occupied neighborhood. Often short-term rentals bring along a vacation mentality with excessive noise, partying, parking issues, excessive trash, and we are concerned that short-term rentals will negatively change the character and transform the quality of life in our neighborhood. There are also safety issues, property value issues, and issues to the local economy. In closing, we respectfully ask that you deny this request for short-term rentals in our Neptune's Cove neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have, it looks like Mr. Ed Lowry.
Sure, it's just the research I've done. Can you hear me? Is that mic close enough to me?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate you allowing me this time.
Would you give your name and address, please?
I'm allowed to set it up here. Is that better?
Oh, I was just saying your name and address.
I'm sorry?
Your name and address.
Yeah, I was getting to that.
Okay.
My name is Ed Lowry. My wife Cynthia, and I live at 9509 Crete Circle in Tuscaloosa. I am speaking against the variance request that has been submitted for 2407 Olympus Drive in Neptune's Cove and the lakes. The research that I'm submitting today has exhausting pros and cons for the decision you must make about this property. I know that the council commissioned this body to make those decisions regardless of the covenants that we all live by as homeowners in the community. Living next door to an STR can range from mildly concerning to completely life-altering. Articles abound concerning STRs having nightmarish results for neighbors. Local residents worry the penetration of STRs in the neighborhoods will change the character and transform the quality of life of the area. The single issue has led to heavy protests in New York, San Francisco, and in smaller towns dealing with the same upheaval of complaints concerning STRs. This has led councils and committees such as yours dealing with STRs in such a way that they are looking for regulations that protect the character of the neighborhoods. I've submitted you an insider article this fairly recent, April the 5th of 2023, which I've submitted. This basically said this has led councils, the Voice of San Diego, which is an October 2017 article, short-term rentals aren't worth the long-term harm. I've submitted that also. Confirms that STRs, a commercial use in single-family residential neighborhood, undermines the purpose and intent of a single-family zoning, causes economic offsets, and creates administrative and enforcement problems for the city. Single-family zoning is sacrosanct to the core, and it is to protect a place reserved for families and children. And those school buses come in our neighborhood every day, twice a day. You're tasked with a heavy responsibility as your decision pits one owner in the neighborhood against a myriad of other homeowners' investment, their investment in their right to have quiet enjoyment of their property. Cities such as Chattanooga, Tennessee, Aspen, Colorado, Dallas, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Dauphin Island, Alabama, Memphis, Tennessee, residences around Gunnersville Lake even. These are a few of the 26 cities that are dealing with complaints, but most of all seeing great neighborhoods such as the Cove and the lakes turn into, as Bernadette Burrell in Santa Rosa said, and she told the council, my problem is I moved into a residential neighborhood and now I live next to a hotel. In total, Insider Articles covers 26 cities of all sites whose STRs were a good idea until they weren't. However, regardless of the pros and cons, the cities wishing they hadn't allowed STRs in the manner they did, there is one factor I can't reconcile. Here's the question. You are asked to decide on one property that will override the wishes of almost all the neighbors in our Neptune Cove and the lakes. What realistic, legal conscription or moral aspect overrides the request of one family against the wishes and concerns of the families who moved into a residential neighborhood and don't want to live next to a hotel? I appreciate your time. And I got 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we have a Miss Taylor. Good evening.
Hello, I'm Tawana Taylor.
You might want to
This is my daughter
put the
Molly.
mic down. Oh, thank you.
Hello, I'm Tawana Taylor, and this is my daughter Molly. We reside at 9500 Creek Circle. After the death of my husband in 2018, we decided to move to a smaller home with a smaller yard. We moved to Neptune's Cove in July 2020. We selected this home and neighborhood because of the quiet, safe, family-oriented feel that we got after multiple visits, drive-throughs, and knowing it was a single-family residential neighborhood. My daughter Molly is a high-functioning autistic adult, so the importance of our safety is my utmost concern. We live at the corner of Creek Circle. This house is directly behind our house. It's on a hill. From the yard, as well as inside of 2407 Olympia's Drive, my house is exposed to being visible to my patio, my backyard, my living area, my bedroom. This is where my family and I live. Having the ability to know my neighbors allows me comfort and security. Our comfort and security would be diminished by having transient renters for only a few days. For my daughter, this would create unnecessary anxiety and also diminish her quality of life. Your granting your variance positively affects only one family, but it has a definite negative effect on over 100 families in Neptune's Cove and the lakes. I plead with you, we plead with you, please deny the requested variance for 2407 Olympia's Drive. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do also have pictures of my home, this house looking down on my home. I have her diagnosis, a copy of it, if you need to have it for your records, and that's all. With me, if you need those.
Okay. You got them? You've already given them to them? Just for a point of clarity, and I know if you don't attend these meetings and deal with this on a routine basis, this is a special exception, just for clarity. I know a variance was mentioned several times, but for short-term rentals, it's a special exception, and that's more of a legal issue, but just for a point of clarity. We do not have anyone else signed up to speak in opposition or in favor. Mr. Ashcraft, we can give you the opportunity if you choose to come to the podium. You heard the comments of those who were in opposition. It's totally your choice to come before the group or not.
Tanner Ashcraft, 903 Heritage Drive. I understand the fear. I mean, this is new, relatively new, especially to different communities and different parts of town. We paint this picture of a potential guest, and it's never completely out of the question, but when you take the right parameters in properly managing these homes, I mean, for instance, we had a family from Vermont came in town for the whole week of Thanksgiving, not only for the Iron Bowl, but to spend Thanksgiving with their daughter that goes to school here. She wanted home-cooked meals that she hadn't had since her parents live in Vermont. We had a family from Colorado come down. His son was a senior here with a music recital. I mean, these are families looking for, instead of to split up into 2 or 3 hotel rooms, they want a comfortable home with a kitchen to cook a home-cooked meal, not to come party. The whole fear of partying and all, I've told you all how we try to stop that, and we've done a very good job of that up till now. We'll continue to do that. I don't want to party at this house, and the owners definitely don't. This is their second home. They have all their personal property in here, so they don't want to party any more than the next door neighbors do. But thank you.
Thank you. hold on a second, sir, just one moment. Ms. Hayes, under our new rules, go over again for us after the rebuttal of the petitioner, what is allowed.
So after the rebuttal of the petitioner, it's limited to 2 minutes
And
for
is-
any
and is-
additional.
Are those additional comments directed to what was just introduced at the podium?
Yeah.
Okay. So just for everyone's benefit, anyone who chooses to speak is limited to 2 minutes, but it needs to be addressed to any comment in the rebuttal that Mr. Ashcraft made, just for a point of clarity. So does that impact anyone who'd like to speak?
I'm Henry Burt. I live at 9518 Crete Circle, right on the corner diagonal from the house that is seeking short-term rental. One point that was made a bit ago by Mr. Ashcraft, he stated that it would be surveilled, that with video cameras out in the back. That is particularly concerning if you look at the photographs there from the house. The windows look down. That house is up on a hill. And the houses that Ms. Taylor and Molly live in are down there, clear view on their patio and all. And there are 3 other houses that go along there that are the same way. So, you know, if you've got video cameras there, what's the privacy? Who's watching those cameras? And what does that do to their privacy? So.
And just to comment, and staff may be able to echo along your point, that would go for your existing neighbors now with cameras for security. I don't know that there's a ordinance about cameras and placements and what's allowed and not allowed for all of us who live there. Obviously, the short-term renter, the guest, if it was approved, would have no access to those cameras. That's a camera system tied to their phone network for security purposes. Again, if we get into what cameras are allowed or not, that might be said for the homeowner who lives there, who paid for the cameras for their benefit. That's a question I don't know. I see your potential concern.
Who would be looking at those cameras, though?
Yeah, well, like anyone who owns the house and owns the cameras. But again, that's not for us to say or of the legality of that or not. But I do appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, sir, behind you, this gentleman. Could you, sir, if you need to speak, we have to have you come and state your name and address so everyone can hear you.
My name is Neil Hodo, and I reside 3424 on Crete Circle. However, let me apologize for my hearing also. I couldn't understand what he was saying. Old age is catching up with me. And I don't know what he said, but I would like to rebut the fact that they want to buy in a residential area when they are also buying all these smaller places or getting variances on them. We have several people, elderly, in our community that don't understand all of these things. But we do know this, that we have a strong, welcoming community of people who want to live there, but not rent there. And we feel really that the rental idea is really kind of like what's happening around the ball games. People renting their houses out, and then when they leave, then the owner has to go in and pick up all the trash and stuff. So I'm just simply saying I didn't understand what he was saying, but expressing my opinion, we have so many people there that are against this completely. Thank you for your time, and forgive me for my hard of hearing.
I'm in the same boat on hearing, so, but thank you for your comments. Okay, by a show of hands, was there anyone else who wanted to rebut specifically to the comments made by Mr. Ashcraft? Yes, ma'am. Please come forward.
My name is Ella Wells. My address is 2341 Olympus Drive. That is my permanent address. That's my permanent residence. I live 2 doors from the property in question. And I would like to address Mr. Ashcraft's most recent comments and about surveilling the property. If Mr. Ashcraft intends to surveil the backyard of the property, the left side of the yard of the property, he will be surveilling about 7 backyards below. If you could bring up the photograph of the front elevation of the property, please. It's really hard to tell from this photograph because it's not white out. But this property sits at a really high elevation. If you draw a plane from the first floor of the property across to the left, you are in the eaves and the attic of the houses below. And there are about 7 houses below that will be affected. They will have loss of use and loss of privacy. If you look at the back right corner of the house, which is really not photographed well in this photograph, but this is all we have, there's a very small patio. That patio is 9 feet from the fence of the upper neighbor where the gentleman is painting. There's no fence strategy, if you will, for this property that would screen it from the neighbors below that faced Creek Circle. When you're in the upper floor of this property, you're now about 35 feet above the houses below. And you may think, well, what's the difference? What's the difference with having a short-term renter in there? Well, the difference is that all of us who live in Neptune's Cove, which is a garden home community with tight tolerances, we have bought into the philosophy of do unto others for the good.
Ma'am, your time's up. We have a hard rule on the time. Everyone's afforded the same amount of time.
Okay, thank you.
Your point's taken. Thank you.
Pardon me?
Your point was heard and taken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I gave a call. Ms. Wells, I believe, was the last hand that came up. So if there's nothing else to rebut, at this point, we're closing public comment and moving to board discussion. First, as in any meeting, in a public meeting, and again, so if you don't know, we're all volunteers. We're all volunteers up here. We're all citizens of Tuscaloosa. We're representing different districts across the city. I particularly live in District 3, which is the same district you all are from. I live in a subdivision with covenants. It's an older subdivision than yours. So as far as being a homeowner, I heard that reference from several speakers, and a huge investment. I think as a group, this body are in the same boat. So that being said, I do want to applaud the interest and fervor of all the homeowners, and I will say, and I hope I get some agreement here, from the groups that have come out, you're probably one of the best behaved and most articulate with salient points. So that I do commend you and appreciate that. It's helpful. It is helpful to us to hear that, and we respect that. But I don't know, just a show of hands, how many folks in here, regardless of your opinion tonight, have stayed in an Airbnb or VRBO anywhere? So there's, okay. So, and y'all, all of us may have different experiences. I've stayed in them at times, and I believe it was the petitioner earlier commenting on one of their guests from out of state seeing family. A VRBO, Airbnb, whatever group that it may go through to market, a short-term rental of a home, I was a little funny about it in several respects. As a homeowner here in the city, being on this board, also as a guest the first time. I've stayed probably half a dozen times over the last 7 years in a vacation rental home like that fell under the short-term rental. Various cities around the country have had extremely positive experiences, and they were family-centered experiences. People like us, all of us who raised our hands. I don't feel those, I don't know you, but based on the comments, you're probably not going in these homes and causing, for the money you're paying, causing damage, noise, trash, things, because you don't do that in your own neighborhood. You respect your property, you respect your neighbors, you respect the rule of law. That's not everyone, we know that, that's obvious. But it is a good option, and the only reason they're in this city, and I'll be the one to say that, and coming to neighborhoods that aren't right next to campus, the driver is what drives the property values in your neighborhoods, and we all enjoy from appreciation rates, and that's based on the University of Alabama, sporting events, graduations, things of that nature. That's probably the only driving reason we even have this ordinance, because this activity was going on unchecked, unmonitored, and growing. Your city council decided back in, Emily, was it 2017 timeframe?
19.
19. But it led up to that before the first draft, the city staff and lots of different people who worked on it crafted a very strong ordinance. In part of getting to the point they got it approved in public comment and meetings, they looked and compared many ordinances. Earlier, Mr. Lowry, I believe, cited a lot of good information. He also cited instances around the country where there weren't such good reactions and people's opinions changed. I can't speak to all those, and I also can't speak to what regulations they had in place or didn't have in place. But I can speak to what the city of Tuscaloosa has. The staff shared with the body, not everyone on this panel tonight was on this body, but these three were, and Michelle's been on there next longest. We were there through the entire iteration of a proposal, planning, public meetings, and sitting in a lot of training sessions because the city council put a check that what I referenced earlier, this is a special exception, not by right for the majority of the city of Tuscaloosa. Without sitting here all night explaining the history, it stepped up at first, only allowed in 2 areas. Then there was a lot of interest from citizens like you from all over the city in different districts who wanted the same opportunity as the original areas that were afforded that. So it evolved and has been amended 3 times. I, as a homeowner in your district, had mixed feelings. Well, I got the first notice in the mailbox because I was within 200 feet of the first one going near me. And nothing's happened. I actually talked to a lot of the people who do short-term rentals after the fact to get their personal experience. And without a doubt, the ones I've talked to have no issues. And that being said, they live there, their possessions there, their investment is there, regardless if it's managed by a third party who's here or not. They don't willy-nilly invest the kind of money it takes to buy a home in your neighborhood and many other neighborhoods, fortunately, with the good home values we have, and treat that as a frivolous endeavor. Yes, it is something different, and it's the fear of the unknown. I've sat here, was it 175 licenses we have now, roughly 200? We've heard almost all of those, if not twice on renewals, the ones that come before us. So there's obviously a lot of fear of the unknown. We can cite any kind of what-if scenario and statistic, and I don't mean to be flippant saying that. That's a normal reaction. But from what we've seen, what city staff has seen, what's proven out to be in bona fide complaints tied to a short-term rental incident, are how many on a hand would you hold up y'all have? Say 5, 10 in
Yeah, we've
4
actually
years?
got a code enforcement officer here who would.
We go out Saturday mornings, we'll make a list of properties, especially that's going to the zoning board of adjustment. We'll go out before game days, especially to make sure parking is handled correctly. And we might get 1 a year from a complaint, but once we look into it, it may not even be valid. And it most likely didn't even have to go to the zoning board of adjustment at that.
Thank you. That's just to give you a point of reference of what we've seen, what the city's experience has been, and it's highly regulated. Again, problems that have happened, of course they've happened. Again, I would be interested to see how lax a lot of the other regulations are in other cities as far as the time constraints, the number of people, off-street parking. So I have to commend staff over time in 3, if not 4 amendments the council, your council, you elect, has voted in. That being said, it just hasn't proven out. It's a proof of concept. And I say that as a homeowner in your district. My opinion has changed greatly. I've had a different exposure than a lot of the public has because it sounds scary, but it just hasn't proven out to be a boogeyman negative thing. The other item, I know it might have been Miss Wells, talked about the topography in the neighborhood. If you're in an upstairs window in a home, and I didn't see the back of the home in question as far as the windows, but if you're in an upstairs home on an elevation change, you're going to look out every time you look out your window and look in those backyards, regardless if cameras are there. That is the nature of the home that was purchased and the elevation of the neighborhood. Unless you've got a 20-foot fence, there is no direct screening. And again, I don't mean to be flip about that, but that's just the reality of the topography of those homes and living in a garden-style neighborhood or small lots. So those issues are there 365. Sorry, sir, there's no comments. But outside of that, I'm in favor. The gentleman who came before you, came before 2 others tonight, was approved based on the experience he has listed. He went over in detail the monitoring they do on their homes and being on top of that. He was approved in 2 other neighborhoods. Just with a large number that showed up tonight, very well articulated, and I appreciate your presence, but that gentleman is the same gentleman who would represent this home. I don't feel just because there's opposition in this case that's any reason to deny him the same opportunity, the homeowner, but him as their representative, as was approved in 2 other cases leading up to this. So based on that, I'm in favor of granting a total of 8 adults with 4 vehicles parked off-street with the additional requirement recommending of city staff of 2 vehicles must be parked in the garage for a total of 30 nights in 1 probationary calendar year.
Again, these are always difficult, especially when we are tasked to determine what the characteristics of a neighborhood are. Not living in those neighborhoods, especially when there are no other short-term rentals currently in those neighborhoods, that's one thing I do look at. I agree, we were approved in 2 other neighborhoods with this manager, but I also think different neighborhoods have different characteristics as well. So I'm going to hush and listen to the rest of my board members. I'm really not sure on this one, but I'm going to pass it to the rest of my fellow board members.
For me, I've sat through several of these short-term rentals, and I'm always in favor of the city council giving approval to everybody, having the opportunity. But I do admit that this is a special case, and this is the first time for me where I see your valid points. When you show the topography and looking into several homes, I mean, this is the first time we've ever had one where looking from this window, they can see into 7 homes and then see on the side. I think this is a special case. Now, if it's a neighbor that lives there and they bought the home, then okay, you have a neighbor. But for different people to come in at different times, I do see that as being something a little bit different. And it's not just looking into one backyard. The pictures show that it's looking into several backyards and not just a little bit, like your whole backyard. And I do see that as something that's a little bit different than just what we normally have. If it was 1 yard and maybe just kind of sort of looking in, then I'd be like, okay, you have a right to have short-term rental. But I do think this is a special case and that You all have made some valid points with that. That's the point that is driving home for me. The rest of it is we've heard before, and it's like every other neighborhood. But that one issue where I can see into 7 different yards and different people coming in each weekend, I do think that could be somewhat uncomfortable and kind of a little bit disruptive to the neighborhood. Even if it's a regular family, nice people coming, that means that when somebody's visiting, I really wouldn't feel as comfortable in my backyard. So I do see that point. And for that reason, I'm not in favor of this particular short-term rental. Not that I don't think that he could manage it. I love the cameras. Cameras are gonna be there, so that's not an issue for me. Them having cameras in the backyard, if your neighbor had a ring, and most of the time the cameras are pointed towards their doors and their houses and not necessarily looking at your yard or anything. So I don't see that as a point. But my point would be different people coming in and out of the house and looking into so many different. If it was 1 or 2, but 7, I mean, down the row, on the side, that's a lot of people being affected, not just a couple of people. So that's my point there. So that's why I'm not in favor.
Anytime we're dealing with short-term rentals, it's there are issues that can be brought up. I've always had my feelings and issues about short-term rentals, regardless of what district it's in or what neighborhood it's in. It could be in a neighborhood with everyone is a long-term renter, or in a neighborhood where no one rents, everyone owns a home. And there's still gonna be some issues that everyone may or may not feel comfortable with. And one thing that we would always say previously was, it's one of those issues where if you see something, contact 311, report it to the city, what have you. In this instance, I always feel as though it's almost a right to at least give the individual an opportunity until they prove you wrong. The topography of the house, that is something that was brought forward, and what can be done about that? I mean, yes, we can say, well, no good to short-term rentals, but at the end of the day, if they so choose, they can still do a long-term rental, which is 30 days. And like the gentleman mentioned before, you may have a traveling nurse or someone that may be a part of a construction company that comes in and may be working at Mercedes, and you can have 6 different individuals come in for 30-day periods. And at that point in time, it's actually nothing that can be done. Short-term rentals are more so regulated than anything else when it comes to renters coming into your neighborhood. At least you have some type of guidelines or something to follow and something you can report. This has been revised 3 times, as board chair has mentioned. It may be going to a 4th or 5th revision. And we typically would see something where you would have neighborhoods that may have a covenant that say, okay, look, we don't want it in our neighborhood. And then you may have some neighborhoods that don't have a covenant and they have little to no voice. And I mean, they have numerous short-term rentals. In this position, as I stand right now, I'll be in agreement with board chair to give the individual opportunity for the 1 year for 30 nights. And if there's any issues when they come back for renewal, it will be on the record, and then they'll be shut down and won't be able to have any short-term rentals at all.
I've been on the board since the beginning, since the very first short-term rental. I have to agree with Mr. Rollins that short-term rental is there's so many more ways to take care of any kind of issue than a long-term rental. So what can happen with this house? Can it be a long-term rental? Can they rent it for 6 months and then another new group comes in for 6 months? Yes, that can happen. Can they put up cameras? Yes, they can put up cameras. With short-term rental, and I so appreciate the petitioners putting up all of the safe ways he's put up. I have to honestly say, since I've been on the board, I don't think any manager of short-term rentals has given this much interest in taking care of the property. The good thing about this, if there is a problem, and if you've ever listened to us at all, we say call 311. Call 311. We have an enforcement officer that will go out, will take care of the problem. If for any if 311 is closed at the time you need them, call your non-emergency number with the police department. They will go out and they will take care of that. I feel like he should have an opportunity like everyone else does. Yes, the house is in a unique and peculiar place, but I am in favor of giving him an opportunity to try this for 30 nights. If it doesn't work, if there are complaints, this will be the end of that.
If there are no other board comments, we will move to a reading of the petition and a vote. In the matter of ZBA-40-23, Tanner Ashcraft petitions for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a dwelling for more than 45 nights on the property located at 2407 Olympus Drive, zoned R3 in Council District 3, subject to the following conditions: a total of 8 adults, a total of 4 vehicles, with 2 of those all parked off-street, with 2 being required to park in the garage, a total of 30 nights in a 1 calendar year of probationary period. Voting
No.
No.
yes.
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 The petition failed.
You guys, they don't get to have it. They don't get to have the short-term
It was
rental.
denied.
Denied.
The petition.
I could tell they didn't know.
They were sitting there like, what
It's
is
like,
that
what
mean?
happened?
Emily, we're going to break. Yeah.
I could tell they didn't know. They was like,
They were like, what that mean?
What that mean?
For everyone remaining in the chamber for the following petitions, we're going to take a 5-minute quick break, and we'll be back at 8:13. Thank you. Okay, if I could have everyone's attention, we're going to go ahead and get started back with the next case.
Okay, moving on to our next case, ZBA 4123, Tanner Ashcraft petitions for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a property in a historic district located at 1714 8th Street, zoned R3H, Council District 4. Here's an aerial view of that property as well as the zoning. Then a closer aerial view. Again, this is going to look familiar. This was previously approved last year. Some nearby short-term rentals. This is in the tourist overlay district, so you can see why there is a lot. Here's a view from the street and of that parking area. Applicable regulations. This is a, quote, new short-term rental request. The house was previously approved under separate management. The house is 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, no violations found or complaints received. The request is for 4 vehicles, 8 adults. If approved, staff recommends 2 vehicles and 4 adults. Do I have any questions for staff?
Tanner Ashcraft, 903 Heritage Drive. Another short-term rental. This one had a license with another manager. That manager is no longer managing this property, so the owner wants me to take it over. When this, again, this is my first time in front of the ZBA. We filed this petition. The driveway is very long. There's a carport in the very back. So I have a better understanding now of the 2-car limit, even though there's plenty of room. So that's why it was sent in that way. We're trying to get it in on time, so we filled in what we did. So, got any questions?
We're familiar, most of us are familiar with this property because it has previously been approved, obviously with the driveway constraints. Just curious, there was a different operating or management company representing the previous, or the owner.
That's right.
Were you aware, based on your conversations with the owner, did they have any issues with, typical issues with any short-term renters?
I'm not aware of any. If there are, this property wasn't rented very much. This, the family that owns this property, they use it quite a bit. He bought it, I think, in '06. His son played football here. They've kept it ever since, and he is a big Alabama fan. Okay. He was here for A-Day. He comes to every football game. So
When's he gonna
told me
rent it?
that the first time I ever talked to him. So anyway, I'm not aware of any. I know that, I don't know if it'll ever get brought up again, but of course we'll do cameras and all, but the previous Neptune's Cove situation, our cameras show our houses, they show our doors. We have cameras that see who's coming in out of our house, not what our neighbors are doing. So.
Okay, we've heard you several times tonight, so we understand rules, procedures, you being the primary point of contact, et cetera. Are there any other questions, Mr. Ashcraft? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, we do not have anyone signed up to speak, either in opposition or in favor of. So we will, at this point, close public comments and open board discussion. This house previously had been approved for STR. Now it's under new management. It's coming back before us. It is treated, though, as a new request, Ms. Hayes. It's coming before us now that we've changed it in the code. So that being said, the parking is the issue, a kind of a limiting factor there. So that, and also just to make a point, this is on 8th Street. It's a one-way, very tight, very limited parking. Obviously, it is illegal for short-term renters to park on the street. I would impress upon, if it's approved, for the Mr. Ashcraft to make that as a very big point to any potential renter there. Streets not allowed, it's very congested out there on the one-way. That being said, I'm in favor of granting the petition per city staff's recommendation of a total of 4 adults, 2 vehicles parked off-street, a total of 30 nights in a 1-year initial probationary period.
I'm in agreement.
I agree with my fellow board member.
I agree, I'm in favor.
I'm in favor.
There's no further board discussion. We'll move to a reading of the petition and a vote. And the matter is ZBA-41-23, Tanner Ashcraft petitions for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a property in a historic district located at 1714 8th Street, zoned R3H in Council District 4. Voting with Mr. Eatman.
Yes.
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 The petition passed.
Moving on to case ZBA 4323, Ashley Thomas petitions for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a property located at 2320 10th Street East, zoned to RD2, Council District 5. Here's an aerial view of that property as well as the zoning. And then a closer aerial view. Again, another property that may look familiar because this was previously approved under separate ownership. And that's what that little dot says right there. But there are some short-term rentals to the south as well. So here is a view of that property. Moving back to this rear parking area so you can get a good grasp of that. Applicable regulations. This is a new short-term rental request that houses 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, no violations or complaints. The request is for 2 vehicles and 4 adults, and if approved, staff recommends 2 vehicles, 4 adults. How many questions for staff?
I got plenty of parking.
Hey, my name is Ashley Thomas, and I live at 2320 10th Street East. So it's my primary residence, purchased the property back in March. The previous owner used it as a short-term rental, and so when I bought it, it came with all the furniture, came with pretty much everything fully furnished to use as a short-term rental. So I would like to do the same thing under the same terms.
Ms. Thomas, have you had experience with short-term rentals as far as managing one?
This would be my first time managing a short-term rental. I did work in real estate for 3 years, so I have like experience with like the contracts of a rental agreement, but not directly managing.
Okay. You mentioned this is your primary residence.
Yes, sir.
Where will you go while it's being, if it's approved and rented? Short-term.
So I've got a list of about 5 college friends and then also some church family friends that have said that if it does get approved, I could stay with them.
Okay. And will you be the primary point of contact for any issues relating to it, the property?
I will.
And have you prepared rules and regulations to be posted in the property?
So I've got a binder. So I've got like the quiet time hours. Let's see what else I had. Like a minimum age, so has to be over 25 years old. I also have the video cameras, so anytime like people are entering the house, because it's got sensors on the doors and the cameras, so anytime people are entering, I get a notification on my phone. I have keypad locks on the front door and the back door. And let's see. And then parking, so they have to park in the back, like not on the driveway. 2 cars go in that back parking lot, and then also no additional guests as well.
Okay. Yeah, the off-street parking is a big deal, even though it may be legal
Right.
today for you to use. It won't be if it's in that practice.
Right.
Short-term rental. Okay. Are there any other questions for Ms. Thomas? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we do not have anyone signed up to speak in either opposition or in favor of the petition, so we're going to close public comment and move to board discussion. I remember this property from the previous approval. From talking to Ms. Thomas, she said she had some experience with contracts in the rental world, several years of work experience. And she has stated she will be in the community in Tuscaloosa and be available as a contact, posting rules and regulations with parking in the rear or gravel area. So based on that, I'm in favor of granting, per the city staff's recommendation, on the total of 4 adults, 2 vehicles parked off-street in the rear, of the property, a total of 30 nights and one probationary year.
I agree.
I agree as well.
No, it's just a comment.
I agree, I'm in favor.
I'm in favor.
If there are no further comments from the board, we'll move to a reading of the petition and a vote. In the matter of ZBA-44-23, in the matter of ZBA-4323, Ashley Thomas petitions for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a property located at 2320 10th Street East, zoned RD2 in Council District 5, subject to the following conditions: a total of 4 adults, a total of 2 vehicles parked off-street in the rear of the property, a total of 30 nights, and a 1-year probationary period. Voting with Mr. Eatman.
Yes.
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 The petition passed.
Okay. Next, we have ZBA 4423. Jamie Lambert petitions for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a property located at 1517 Hodge Circle, zoned R4, Council District 3. So here's an aerial view of that property as well as the zoning. That's just south of the Heritage House and the Towns, right over by Rock Quarry Elementary. So here's a view of the aerial view, then a view from the street. Applicable regulations. This is a new short-term rental request. The house is 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, no violations or complaints. They are requesting for 3 vehicles and 4 adults, but if approved, staff recommends 2 vehicles and 4 adults. Do y'all have any questions for staff? We did receive 2 emails in opposition as well as a petition in opposition with 20 signatures.
Okay, going to have, is it Miss Lambert? Jamie Lambert?
Going once?
It looks like the petitioner is not here.
Did they?
Yes, sir. Are you Jamie Lambert?
Okay.
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 So in that respect, the board can either hear the case or you can vote to continue it to next month.
Continue, yeah. Do I?
Do we need to move
Yeah.
to continue?
So, sir, the Miss Lambert is obviously not here. Excuse me? No one signed up to speak.
So we have in the past, if the board would like for the individuals to have an opportunity to speak, they can, if the board sees fit.
Just for clarity to everyone, Ms. Lambert, the petitioner, is not here. However, those of you who came here and have sat here for 3 and almost a half hours, out of respect for your time, you're not signed up. However, if you want to speak on this case, our intention is, how we normally handle this, is to continue till next month because the petitioner is not here. We can't ask them any questions. That is a standard practice. You're more than welcome, if you're here, to speak because you're here. If not, and the petitioner comes back, you'll be notified and you come back. So that's totally up to anybody here. Is that clear? Yes, sir. Continue to next month. But you're welcome to speak if you would like because you're here. Come on, sir.
And this will be on record.
Just state your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Charles Holloman. I represent the Homeowners Association for Mills Trace. The Homeowners Association actually sent a email stating all of the owners in the subdivision that are voting no for a short-term rental. This neighborhood is 92 to 95% 65 and older. We have no issue with rentals in the neighborhood. We actually do have some rentals in the neighborhood. They just do not choose to have any short-term rentals in the neighborhood. There are only 26 owners. There's only 26 lots in the subdivision. 20 out of the 26 have voted no, that they do not wish to have short-term rentals. Therefore, we ask politely that you decline for the approval of this petition.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Sir, did you like to speak? If you could just state your name and address, please.
Ron Gilbert, 1538 Todd Circle. Can people behind me hear me? Because I don't hear very well. During my lifetime, which is a little longer, I think, than yours, I have had rentals. And I've had friends that have rentals. Sometime along the way, when you have a rental, you're going to have a problem. That problem may affect the inside of the house, or it may affect all the rest of the neighbors. There could be problems, and there are problems. So I come up here to take a little bit of, respectfully take a little issue with what you said of your single rentals. I don't completely disagree with you, but my experience has been that the more rentals there are, the more chances there are going to be problems, both with the property and or problems with neighbors. And the end of that, the end result of that is sometimes not good. I appreciate the opportunity to say not much, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak? Okay. That being said, we're closing public discussion, and then we will move to the board to consider a continuance.
I make a motion to continue this petition until next month.
Second.
Read it or just go across to continue? Don't have to read. Okay.
Yeah.
All those in favor of a continuance, starting voting with Mr. Eatman?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
So here is our last case of the night, ZBA 4523, Wright and Lisa Hale, petition for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a property located at 3B Country Club Hills, zoned R2, Council District 1. Here's an aerial view of that property as well as the zoning, and then a closer aerial view. Some nearby short-term rentals. View of that house and that driveway. Applicable regulations. The new short-term rental request, the house is 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, no violations found or complaints received. The request is for 3 vehicles, 6 adults. If approved, staff recommends 2 vehicles and 4 adults. Do I have any questions for staff?
My name's Lisa Hale, and my husband and I bought this house last May. My husband is from Tuscaloosa. I'm from Birmingham. And he was a member of Tuscaloosa Country Club until it closed. So he actually is a tax attorney and has been in real estate in Tuscaloosa all his life. And so he lost 2 homes off Hargrove Road during the tornadoes. So he decided to buy a home across from Tuscaloosa Country Club and refurbish it. And he did that in 2012, 2013. And so he and I both have owned short-term rentals in Gulf Shores. For 15 years, we're very familiar, but not neighborhoods. So he had rental homes, not short-term rental. So we started in Northport, and we bought a couple of homes, refurbished, did that. And they don't quite have the rules y'all do. So we set those homes up according to your rules. So if and when things occur, we're ready to go, right? So you're a little more stringent than people know We've been doing this quite a while. So you do have strict rules. And we're probably coming from a different avenue. This neighborhood has gone down in value since the country club closed. And my husband is a Tuscaloosan. So we wanted to bring the value back up, really, although we do this for income. But he has another home he owns there behind his house. And we're here 50% of the time. We're in Gulf Shores the other 50% of the time. So that's long term. But with short term, we bought this house. It was gutted for $85,000. We put $85,000 into it. It's now worth over $180,000. So we really want to increase the value of these homes in this neighborhood. We've had 8 or 9 people come by over the last 9 months because it took us a long time to refurbish this home. To rent it or buy it, we told them what we were doing. We let them walk into the home. We wanted everybody to know what we were doing so we wouldn't have an issue. And the backyard of this home is cat-a-corner to our home that we live in 50% of the time. We do have cameras at all of our rentals, but like you said, focuses on the walking up area, the driveway. It doesn't infringe on anybody else's. You don't do that. It's against the law, actually. The backyard the same. We put a deck on back and all that. So I can see in certain circumstances where it would not be beneficial for short-term rentals, probably. In our situation, really, we're increasing the value of this neighborhood, and we've had 0 complaints. We run it, we manage it, we do the yard work, we take care of it. When people come, we do a walkthrough with them. They get in too late, we do it the next morning. So we're on it 24/7, right? Whether we're in town or not. We have maintenance people here. We do short-term rentals in both cities. But I can see the good and the bad. But where we've been able to buy homes and refurbish them and increase the value, it's been a good thing, really. So it is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. It was originally a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. So we just built a whole nother bathroom in there. New shower, new flooring, everything's new in this home, completely. The living room is big enough to have a couch, 2 chairs, and a big couch such as a futon that has a queen mattress. And we do this in our others. So we do request 6. It's got a freestanding kitchen with an island and a 4 separate dining area, living room, bathrooms. We added a deck on the back, 10 by 12 deck that's half covered. And then we did some crush and run by the driveway, and it could park probably 7 or 8 cars. We don't want any of that. 2 to 3 is all we need, just enough for our 4 to 6 people. That's all we're asking.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your experiences. Obviously, between you and your husband, you've had a lot of rental management experience.
Yes.
And also the comment about Northport, every municipality is different on their.
Correct, and Gulf Shores too is different.
Sure.
Yes.
And I do appreciate you taking a more stringent path.
Nobody's
using
here
these.
now, but I'm telling them,
Yeah.
y'all are way more stringent than most cities.
I wish
I've
you.
got one in Pelham, Alabama too, but I was last, so I couldn't tell everybody
Right.
that, but.
I wish you would have gone before.
I know I should have. I was thinking that the whole time I was sitting there,
Right.
like, they don't really know.
Right.
Really, and I'm going to ask, and nobody's here anyway.
Right.
So it's 30 days? We can't have up to 45 days? What do we have to do to request that?
In the first year,
Okay.
and this has been
Just because we spent a lot of money on this house.
I understand that. In the first year, it's for
Okay.
consistency and a standard practice.
Okay.
If approved, it's going to
Okay.
be a maximum. After the first year, that's when there's an opportunity to won't have to come before this body.
Okay.
And through staff, you can request 45.
Okay. I really want to know that.
But I think you've answered the questions. I know I have. I think, speak for the rest of us.
Yeah.
Now, you did mention when you're out of town half the year, if you were doing a short-term rental.
Well, fortunately, the times are different for busy season here and
Right.
here it's fall and spring. It's graduation football games.
Right.
There it's summertime.
Right.
But no, we have maintenance people. And yeah.
Okay. Well, as long as you've got
I still
someone.
manage it. We have padlocks and we have cameras, and I change the locks and let
Sure.
yeah, yes.
Okay, as long as you've got that
Yes.
24/7 contact somewhere, I think, I'm satisfied.
I don't see how people
with
do it
that.
when they're not around all the time. It freaks
And
me out.
the parking requirement by the city,
Yes.
in the bottom highlighted,
Yes.
is 4 adults, 2 vehicles. That's because of the nature of the.
Well, that's okay. We have so much parking, but yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we have enough parking for too many vehicles. We don't want all that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anybody else have any questions? No. Well, thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your patience, too.
Okay, we do not have anyone signed up to speak in either opposition or in favor of the petition, so we will close public comment and go to board discussion. I think the petitioner, Ms. Hale, has demonstrated that she and her husband have quite a few years of experience managing long-term and short-term properties in several locales. Based on that, I'm in favor of taking staff's recommendations for a maximum of 4 adults, 2 vehicles, 30 nights in the first probationary year. Mr. Eatman?
I agree.
I'm in favor as well.
I'm in favor.
I agree.
Okay. That concludes public or board discussion. We'll move to a reading of the petition and a vote in the matter of ZBA-45-23, Wright and Lisa Hale petition for a special exception to allow the short-term rental of a property located at 3B Country Club Hills, zoned R2 in Council District 1, with the following condition: a total of 4 adults, total of 2 vehicles parked off-street, a total of 30 nights in a 1-year probationary period, voting with Mr. Eatman.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
your petition passed. Thank you.